In the formal drawing room of De Valk Palace, Ludger was having a private meeting with First Princess Eileen von Exilian after he had recovered his health. The princess expressed satisfaction that she had personally arranged trustworthy doctors and teased Ludger that he owed her a special favor. After Phasius interjected a few words, the discussion turned serious. Eileen promised a reward but said some matters had to be clarified first. Ludger recounted the incident in detail, confirming that the specimen had used the power of a demon and that the demon actually sealed away had awakened. Eileen anxiously asked about the Lumos girl who had been possessed. Ludger reassured her that the girl's body had changed slightly but showed no abnormal traces. Eileen pressed her temples and asked Ludger to continue monitoring the girl, emphasizing that it would be serious if records of an ancient demon were revived. Ludger agreed that this would give the Lumenis cult the perfect pretext to intervene, and Eileen vowed to try to keep the information hidden for a while. The princess was angry that the cult abused power in the name of God but felt powerless to stop them. Ludger listened and then decided to reveal one thing. Ludger said solemnly that the demon had spoken to him and revealed that the world tree had died down in the underground base and how it had been sealed. Eileen exclaimed in astonishment. Really? Ludger remained composed, though inwardly he knew what he had said wasn't entirely true. He had actually heard that information from Zero Order, not Basara. But it was best to pretend the demon had revealed the truth. Ludger continued that the demon had also mentioned that the spirits helped create the underground world tree. Eileen asked curiously, "The spirits?" The princess pieced the information together and mentioned the Liefers family, the powerful spirit nobles who guarded the world tree. She pondered further, but they were only assigned to protect it after some incident. I suspect that incident may be related to the underground world tree. Ludger agreed. If the spirits who made the tree were from Liefers, they were likely exiled for giving saplings of the world tree to humanity. Eileen brightened with hope. Finding a survivor could reveal the truth about that day. Ludger responded realistically. Searching for them was like looking for a needle in a haystack because they hid so well. He was about to bring up another matter, but Princess Eileen suddenly pushed herself to her feet, showing a brief look of overwhelm from the flood of information. Maintaining her authoritative manner, she led him to the royal archives. Elsewhere, the Academy students' tour of De Valk Palace continued. The corridors buzzed with conversation as they admired classic works of art. Professor Serin and Merida chatted happily. Serin was glad the students were enjoying themselves. Merida suggested that the royal family had intervened to make up for the trip being disrupted by yesterday's chaos. Serin suddenly lost spirit, feeling guilty for sitting safe in the palace when she could be out helping more people. Merida reassured her that the royal family kept them inside to ensure their safety. Professor Merida added, "For now, the role of aid should be given to those closest neighbors, friends, and family who can share in deep sorrow." Serin watched quietly. Merida gently concluded that the only thing they could do now was trust in those people's ability to persevere. In the inner gardens, Tessie excitedly led the group. Leo, exhausted, complained and wanted to rest. Tessie turned back, angry, questioning why he would skip the outing. Leo retorted bitterly that everyone was too tired after yesterday's events. Leo dodged the issue but admitted his anxieties had eased because of this excursion. Iona also turned away, looking off in another direction. Iona announced she needed to separate from the group for a moment to take care of something. Leo startled and agreed. Iona broke away from the group and headed deeper into the tree-shaded park, calling out cautiously, "Come out, I know you're there." Leaves rustled and heavy footsteps sounded. A mysterious voice said, "Long time no see." Lotheran stepped forward, holding a steel helm in his hand. He called Iona's name. Iona, confused, blurted, "Thaneron?" She took a step back, wary of the helm, and demanded to know why he had vanished after relinquishing the chieftainship. Lotheran replied sadly that he had no choice. The elders cared nothing for magic, and the name Obeli did not suit a bastard-born son. Iona cried out passionately, insisting that beast folk valued talent over bloodline, and no one had told him he was unworthy of the chieftaincy. Lotheran lowered his head, recalling how he had once shown Iona the strength of his primal magic, but even with that power, he still suffered a bitter defeat. The man, perhaps a descendant of the White Bear, had simply overwhelmed him with force and had no intention of taking his life. Along with that humiliation, he realized the world was too vast to remain trapped in a struggle for chieftaincy. So, to cultivate his true power, he hid his race and blended into the human world, making remarkable progress. His voice grew somber. The incident made him see he still had far to go, and he must work harder to avenge the insult inflicted by that white-haired beast. Lotheran looked directly at Iona. "You came to the Empire to bring me back, didn't you?" Iona flushed with momentary embarrassment. She was silent for a moment, then firmly denied it. "That wasn't the only reason I came here." Iona pressed a hand to her chest. her voice steady with resolve. One day she would become chieftain, and they would not be confined to the tribe simply for being beastfolk. Lotheron nodded and smiled gently with understanding. I understand. I support you. Elsewhere in the forest, a piercing shout rang out. Stop right there. Julia, the white-haired student, ran after her and grabbed Sedina's hand, demanding why she kept running and avoiding everyone. Sedina flinched at the question, shrinking inward. Sedina understood that once involved with Black Dawn, she couldn't be close to Julia, and that wouldn't change even after joining Professor Ludger's circle. Sedina asked Julia why she remained so curious after all this time. Julia replied that she had been watching Sedina since the start of the term, and had noticed her avoidance and unwell appearance. Julia observed that at some point Sedina had begun to return to her former self, perhaps since becoming Professor Ludger's teaching assistant. Julia shouted in fury at having waited so long while Sedina continued to dodge her. Julia tried to calm her. She said it out of concern. Professor Ludger is dangerous. Sedina stared back in confusion. Julia, a little anxious, revealed she could use oneric walking to enter others' dreams. Sedina asked, So you've seen Professor Ludger's dreams? Julia shook her head, saying at first he had no dreams at all, but later she began to perceive them faintly. Sedina listened anxiously. Julia recounted that she had seen those vague, fleeting moments, and the dream reflected reality. The professor was killing people. Sedina shivered, cold sweat streaming down her face. She wasn't entirely surprised by the idea he might kill, but if Julia told anyone else, it would be a catastrophe. Sedina asked again. What happened in the dream? Julia recalled. He killed Lin's mother, a student in their class. Hearing this, Sedina was stunned as well. Julia gripped Sedina's hand tightly, warning that he was extremely dangerous and desperately begging her to give up the assistant position. Sedina bowed her head, face hidden in shadow. She whispered that she trusted Julia, but this was a private matter between her and the professor, not for outsiders. Julia froze at the words, her expression briefly clouded with sadness and disappointment. Sedina gently withdrew her hand and said she would judge him for herself. Julia spun away, offended, and stormed off. I shouldn't have intervened. Heavy with sorrow, Sedina turned quietly and walked in the opposite direction. At the entrance to the royal archive, where the ornately carved wooden door was flanked by two armored knights, Princess Eileen and her guard Phaetus waited patiently. The massive wooden door slowly opened, and a blaze of golden light flashed forth, shattering the silence. Ludger, the professor, stepped leisurely out from the heart of the light. Eileen teasingly smiled, half joking that he had kept her waiting too long. She immediately asked about the item he'd retrieved. Ludger, unfazed, lowered his eyes and admitted he'd taken his time choosing because there were so many remarkable pieces. The first item was an unidentified shard of stone he had been collecting. The princess, curious, demanded he skip the shard and tell her about the silver bracelet on his wrist. Ludger raised his hand and obliged. He explained that the silver bracelet was a flowing silver band, capable of transforming into countless forms. The bracelet instantly shifted into a razor-sharp sword, making the princess marvel it was the perfect item for him. Then Ludger touched a golden monocle, the final item called the Vision of Potential, crafted by the first headmaster of Serin. The lens let him gauge others' potential and abilities. Looking through it, Eileen and Phaetus appeared bathed in radiant golden energy. He thought to himself, indeed, these two should not be underestimated. Princess Eileen, on guard, realized he'd just seen something through that lens. Ludger replied curtly that it was just an ordinary monocle. She shot him a skeptical glare and demanded he say what he'd seen, making Ludger break into a cold sweat, flustered. Ludger answered awkwardly, deliberately closing his eyes as if hiding something, and said he'd seen the brightest light in the world. Eileen cleared her throat and offered a half-smile of charm, warning that praise alone wouldn't make her let this go. Phaetus chuckled softly behind her, thinking she enjoyed the compliment. That afternoon, in another corridor, Lin sat lost in thought, finding the palace so peaceful that the horrors of the previous day felt unreal. Lin recalled that since her eyes had suddenly ached, she could see people's energies more clearly. Then the monster possessed Flora, and Ludger had appeared to save her. She wondered about the incident, debating whether Professor Ludger knew, but felt it would be rude to confront him uninvited. Just then, Ludger suddenly stopped right in front of her. His abrupt halt sounded sharply. Lin was surprised. He looked at her with a serious yet gentle gaze, and said he had something to tell her, suggesting they find somewhere quieter. Ludger led Lin to a stone bench in a secluded garden. As they sat, a large, majestic black crow landed on his arm. Lin asked in astonishment if it was his familiar, noting how unusual it was. Ludger nodded and introduced it. Its name was Ader Nocturnus. It moves through shadows and often takes the form of clothing. Lin widened her eyes in surprise. So, when you suddenly appeared to save me, it was thanks to this familiar? Aether Nocturnus dissolved into a swirling shadow. Ludger cryptically explained it consumes a great deal of mana, so he cannot summon it for long, especially in bright places like this. Lin responded in awe. Lin moved on to the matter that troubled her and asked about Flora. Ludger reassured her that he'd visited Flora himself, and she wasn't gravely injured. Seeing Lin bow her head, Ludger added that she seemed deeply worried for her. Lin fell silent, distressed that it happened while Flora was saving her, and that she had been possessed by that strange monster. Ludger looked straight at her, his gaze sharper, and said the entity that possessed her was a demon, and Lin's current eye condition was connected to that demon. Lin gasped in horror. Ludger quietly added that she should know this. She possessed something called the Judging Demon Eye. Ludger explained. The Judging Demon Eye discerns right from wrong, sees through essence, and is a unique power the Lumenes Church has long attributed to the Holy Maidens. Lin's bright blue eyes flared, amplified, casting a dazzling light. Lin recalled the demon's words. Fear rushed in and she panicked, asking if that meant the Lumenes Church would come to take her. Ludger shook his head and said he would not let that happen, so she need not worry. Then he issued a stern warning. The term Holy Maiden sounds noble, but the Church will do anything to exploit her. There may also be others hunting her, so she must keep it secret. Lin worriedly bit her lip, asking if she could conceal her conspicuous eyes, then remembered Arendir already knew. Ludger stared at her and asked whether Arendir was someone she could trust. Her hands clenched, trembling as she gripped her skirt. She hesitated. At last she raised her head, eyes full of trust, and said she wanted to trust her, even though she didn't know everything. Ludger bowed his head and said he would ask no more. Then Ludger lifted his hand, gently touched Lin's eye, and a flash of golden light sprang from his gloved palm. He withdrew his hand. Lin's face registered slight astonishment, but her eyes had returned to normal. He explained he had placed a simple seal on her eye temporarily. Lin, surprised, touched her eye. Ludger offered a final serious piece of advice. It only buys you time, so be careful. Your power has awakened and will grow stronger with time. He scanned the garden, then looked straight at Lin, warning her to be wary if strangers approached and to be even more suspicious if they seemed overly kind. At that moment, hidden behind a nearby tree, Sedina secretly witnessed the entire conversation. She was stunned by what she'd heard about Ludger, the professor she admired, wondering how he could do that to the mother of one of his students. Torn and anxious, she wondered if there had been some misunderstanding. The next afternoon, in an opulent conference chamber of Devolk Palace, a delegation from the Kingdom of Bredis sat around a large meeting table opposite Princess Island. A cleric with a sly smile, representing Bredis, offered a perfunctory condolence over the unpleasant incident. Princess Island sat upright and responded diplomatically, then hinted that the delegation had brought far too many people for what should have been a simple aid mission. Island pondered that they had arrived suspiciously quickly, almost as if they had foreknowledge and had prepared in advance, and she wondered whether it was merely coincidence. She glanced at the mysterious woman seated beside him, a high priestess of the holy nation Bredis, a position of considerable power. The woman wore a half-mask and had long curly white hair. She sat erect, her lips curved in a perpetual polite smile that made her motives unreadable. Back at the table, the cleric bristled as Island fixed her stare on the woman. He slammed his hand on the table and accused her of disrespect, reminding her she was not yet queen. Island did not flinch. She answered with a confident, haughty smile, saying she might not be queen now but one day she would be. She taunted that the representative would never become a high priestess. The cleric ground his teeth in anger but could not retort, forced to concede that he was perfectly content with his own station. Island's tone hardened as she pressed the point. The fact they brought holy knights made her suspect they intended to use force against Exilion. The cleric gave a sly smile and indirectly admitted there would be no immediate use of force against the Empire, but that could change depending on her answer. Island gritted her teeth, thinking that if he were a messenger from another nation she would have beheaded him, but because Bredis wielded tremendous power, she had to be cautious. She recalled Ludger's words. They were employing brute force to intervene, and they were more than merely a nation with a strong army. The cleric asked the real question. They had reports of a black orb appearing in the heart of the capital. Did she know anything about it? Princess Island pretended to ponder, saying she had also received a report she couldn't yet decipher, and suggested the Liberation Army in league with dark mages might have caused it. The cleric immediately brushed it off, asking if she really thought dark mages could do such a thing. Island shot back at once, asking why he was so sure dark mages couldn't be responsible. The cleric slammed his hand on the table in anger and threatened to petition his kingdom to intervene. Island cut him off with an icy stare, her face almost level with his, and asked, "Your kingdom?" Island continued in an authoritative tone that made the cleric falter, saying he was not here as a royal envoy but as a representative of the High Priestess. The cleric flinched. Island pressed him, demanding by what right he spoke of what his kingdom would do. The chill emanating from Island raised the tension to a fever pitch. She threatened to tell him what the Empire does to rude men like him. At that moment, High Priestess Remlia gave Island a knowing smile. The cleric tried to object, but Remlia signaled him to be silent. Remlia calmly told Island that the rumors of the future queen being strong, beautiful, and wise were not exaggerated, and she apologized for her colleague's impropriety. Then Remlia presented her request politely but firmly, hoping Island would understand they were there to help, and asked permission to investigate on their own. Island snorted, rose, and ended the debate with, "As you wish." The princess left the council chamber. The cleric, furious, shouted ragingly at Remlia over the Empire's perceived insolence. Remlia and her retinue began to leave. The cleric urged them to go to the site immediately before the Empire could destroy the evidence. Remlia calmly replied she saw no need to rush. The cleric was surprised. Remaining composed, Remlia reasoned that a truly malevolent entity would inevitably reveal itself, and the more they tried to hide it, the easier it would be to find. The cleric grimaced. Remlia added that she wished to see the palace's famed panoramic view. The cleric grumbled assent and offered to guide them. As Remlia and her entourage passed down the grand corridor, they came upon a long-haired, black-haired man with a cold face, Professor Ludger. Instantly, Remlia sensed a unique energy from the man. She turned her head to look back. She called out, bluntly and without reserve, "I sense a peculiar energy from you. Who are you?" The priest scowled, turned back and snarled. "You there. The High Priestess is asking who you are. Are you deaf?" Ludger stood motionless, bowed his head slightly, and cursed inwardly for trying to avoid detection yet still being sensed by Remlia. Despite his reinforcements, the seal seemed weakened from the battle with Basara. He turned to face Remlia and her retinue, glanced at the priest and sneered, calling him a servant, a name that suited him well. The priest bristled at the insult, jabbed a finger in annoyance, and shouted that he represented this noble, not some lowly clerk Ludger could disdain. Ludger shrugged and cut him off, saying it seemed he didn't understand something simple, so he'd explain. "First, I'm not a mere staff member. Second, as a citizen of the Empire, I bow to no one but the Emperor." He stepped closer to the priest, eyes full of contempt, and said that if he truly represented someone, he should learn proper conduct. Didn't he realize his careless behavior was an insult to his master? The priest recoiled in shock. Ludger turned his gaze to Remlia, who watched quietly, and asked how long she intended to keep such a man as her spokesman, advising her to replace him at once. Priest Bredas ground his teeth and stammered in anger. Remlia cut him off. Her masked face revealed nothing. She said he had done well and she appreciated his service, but now it was time for him to rest. Those words drained the would-be spokesman of color. He cried out in panic, "Father!" He struggled as the holy knights seized him and dragged him away, screaming wildly. Ignoring the commotion, Remlia remained indifferent, leaving a hush between them. She spoke, her tone no longer polite. At last, silence. "Now will you tell me who you are?" Ludger replied, "I am a professor at Serin Academy. My name is Ludger Cherish." Remlia smiled subtly, bowed politely, and introduced herself as Remlia of the Kingdom of Bredas, one of fewer than 10 high priestesses. Ludger studied her, thinking she must be a different kind of high priestess than those he remembered, which made sense after 20 years. He turned his back and said he had told her what she wanted to know and took his leave. Remlia paused, watching his retreating figure, remarking that he left immediately after giving his name how cold. Ludger stopped. Remlia remained, curious, and asked if they had met before or if he had ever been to Bredas, for she sensed a unique energy from him. Ludger turned back and gave an evasive answer, noting that a nun from the Freden diocese had also sensed a vague magic about him, so perhaps she felt the same. He added that perhaps his constitution resonated with her, but he hoped she wouldn't force her faith upon him. Remlia put a finger to her lips, pondered, and said that a nun from the Rederbelka diocese had seen the same, yet she sensed something far beyond that. She said the feeling was of something extremely familiar. Ludger turned fully and stared at Remlia, his gaze threatening. Ludger stressed each word with a cold warning. "I expect you to remain silent and not tell anyone about what happened to me today." He ended the meeting, turned and walked away, saying they were both busy. His long black cloak billowed. Remlia made an intrigued sound. After Ludger vanished from sight, another attendant, apparently an aide, approached and anxiously asked if Remlia was all right. She didn't seem herself. She asked for the man's name. The aide answered Ludger Cherish, a name fairly well known among mages. Remlia turned, her expression enigmatic as she considered. The aide eagerly offered to investigate him if it bothered her. She smiled, thanked him, then made one final request in a softer voice. Don't tell anyone about this, especially Catherine. Meanwhile, as Ludger walked, thoughts of Remlia and the kingdom of Bretis swirled in his mind. He was certain after watching her expel her subordinate the moment he spoke a mocking word to someone she had never met. Ludger recalled Princess Island saying that Bretis takes in orphans in the name of charity and grooms those with exceptional potential to become high priestesses. He remembered that during their upbringing they subtly implanted the idea, girls must never defy those of royal blood. Ludger clenched his fist, face full of fury, muttering that nothing had changed in 20 years and calling them contemptible and vile. Footsteps echoed as Ludger pushed open the old door, a familiar creak sounding. He told himself the field trip was over, and he'd return to Serin tomorrow. He'd planned to grab the item and withdraw, but things had been delayed longer than expected. The moment Ludger crossed the threshold, a huge shadow lunged at terrifying speed. It was a black-gray tiger-like creature with glowing green eyes. Ludger blurted, "A chimera?" But the creature didn't attack. It skidded across the floor, struggling to stop, and whispered, "Boss, it's you." Ludger peered closer and recognized the voice. Hans? The massive being trembled, its voice hoarse with emotion, body convulsing and utterly exhausted, begging for an antidote because Ludger had been gone too long. A familiar voice sounded from behind. She scolded Ludger for always being late, saying she thought she'd die waiting for him. Hans shivered at the reprimand but dared not reply. From a corner of the room Grandier emerged, hair long and straight, eyes blazing red and clad in an elegant black dress. She smiled terrifying and seductive and said, "Now shut the door and bring him inside. It'd be troublesome if anyone else saw him." Bellaluna looked frail, clutching her chest and watching. Ludger stepped in, remarking he thought Bellaluna had done this, but it turned out to be her master, and asked how she had managed to obtain a claw from the chimera. Grandier answered that she got it from that little elf. The elf carried all sorts of odds and ends. Ludger shook his head, wondering when Bellaluna had picked it up. Grandier leaned back in her chair, waved a hand, eyes alight with interest, and asked how he felt after fighting the demon. Ludger pressed his lips, lowered his head in helplessness, saying she of course knew everything and had been watching him all along, and that it would be better if she at least taught him how to defeat demons if she wouldn't help directly. Grandier grew more serious as Ludger continued. A high priestess from Bretis had come to the Empire, and she had sensed the Holy King's energy in him. This made the matter more grave. Investigating the truth would now be only a matter of time. Grandier thought Ludger had been reckless using that plan. Ludger kept his composure, explaining that with so many people around he could only act within limits to avoid suspicion and prevent rumors from spreading. Grandier changed the subject, reminding him that eventually he'd have to fight his own kin, and asked if he intended to claim he couldn't fight against his blood relatives. Ludger interrupted without hesitation. "Of course not. Besides, they're all the ones who tried to kill me." He stared straight ahead, blue eyes resolute and cold. "If anyone tries to obstruct what I must do, I won't leave them be, no matter who they are." Grandier narrowed her eyes, red irises clearly pleased with his answer. Grandier rose, her long black gown swaying, said her business was done, and told Ludger to go speak with the two by the door, then departed. Ludger turned to the door where Hans and the elf stood. The wooden door creaked slightly. Hans and the elf bowed timidly. He ordered, "Come in." Hans and Bellaluna entered. The elf smiled shyly. Ludger faced her. "Bellaluna, I've heard you brought back many specimens and test samples of the chimera." He continued, "You returned to the World Tree in secret without notice. I have many things to say to you." Bellaluna shrank back, guilty, the tape over her mouth seeming to deliberately prevent her from revealing the secret. Ludger folded his arms and asked Bellaluna directly, his tone both stern and reassuring, "Is there anything else you haven't told me? If you tell me now, I won't scold you, so be honest." She glanced away timidly and hesitated. "Well, I think. When I was connecting to the World Tree, I was discovered by the elves who tend the World Tree in my homeland." Ludger looked at her, suspicion plain on his face. "What? You were caught while investigating with Chris Benamor?" Bellaluna avoided his gaze, stammering with remorse. "Oh, not then. While you were at the palace, I secretly returned underground and connected with the tree again." Ludger put a hand to his forehead, overwhelmed and speechless. She looked at him shyly and continued, "It seems the connection pathway to the original World Tree has been restored, perhaps since the Demon King broke free. I didn't expect to run into them there." Ludger sighed. "All right, that's at least better than you hiding it from me." He rubbed his temple irritably. "Does that mean the caretakers know exactly who you are?" Bellaluna answered thoughtfully. "Our sensing of each other was very brief, so I don't think so. But they will notice an intrusion into the World Tree." Ludger pondered. "So what do you think they'll do now?" Hans frowned, anxious. and answered for Bella Luna. I expect they'll send an investigative party. After all, it happened in the Empire's capital. Bella Luna finally spoke, worried, arms crossed and head bowed. Our kingdom is very secretive. They will never communicate or exchange with human nations. I'm sure the shadow guards will be dispatched to watch over things. Sweat trickled down her cheek. Ludger asked about the group's identity. Are these shadow guards like our assassination task force? Bella Luna replied, yes. Their primary mission is to track down and punish traitors. Ludger regarded her with concern. But they only detect access points to the World Tree, so returning to Retterbelk shouldn't be a problem, right? Bella Luna frowned. It will be difficult. If they catch even a trace of evidence, they'll chase me across the continent. Bella Luna laughed and waved her hand. But luckily, we have time to prepare. The shadow guards act only on direct orders from the clan leader. It will likely take the leader some time to decide after receiving a report. Meanwhile, in the elf kingdom of Renard Tyrone, members of the elven houses sat around a large table, murmuring among themselves. A gray-haired man at the head of the table spoke. Why did the leader call all of us here so unusually? Another replied. And not just the Leifer family, the lesser houses are present too. The door opened, and someone whispered, She's here. A pale blonde woman in noble attire, her jewelry chiming with each step, entered and greeted them. Is everyone present? Someone answered. Yes, everyone has arrived. She took the chair at the head of the table. An elf across from her, pale blonde hair piled high, demanded, Why have you summoned us here? Bentman Leifer? Bentman replied bluntly. While tending the World Tree, someone dared to attempt access to it. Everyone flinched. The blonde elf who had spoken sprang to her feet, glaring at Bentman with blazing fury. Who would be so insolent? Bentman shouted, decisive and authoritative. In the name of House Leifer, I hereby command the immediate deployment of the Shadow Guards. A few days later, in the rector's office at Serin Academy, before a magnificent arched window, Ludger stood opposite the powerful woman seated behind an elegant desk. Professor Ludger, thank you for your efforts on the field trip. Elisa Willow, rector of Serin Academy, her hair white as snow, said with a radiant smile, I've heard you played a major role in that incident. I only did what needed to be done, Ludger replied calmly, without a hint of pride. Elisa laughed heartily, the sound echoing through the lavish room. Ha ha ha, you're the same as ever. She tilted her head, her smile quickly shifting to seriousness. Anyway, I called you in because there's a matter I want to discuss. You know the incident delayed classes for first and second years, right? Ludger said in a low voice, confirming. Yes, the injured students had to stay in the capital for treatment. She offered a friendly smile, but what she was about to say was far less kind. Therefore, we'll need to accelerate their studies by about 50%. Otherwise, we'll have to cut into their leave time. Ludger frowned briefly, picturing trainees collapsing from exhaustion. Either way, it's going to be hard on the students. I'm also considering using this opportunity to emphasize certain courses, the woman continued, her tone calculating. Ludger immediately grasped her intention. You mean practical magic and basic combat instruction, I assume. Exactly. The woman tapped the desk decisively with her finger. Those skills are always important, but the capital incident made that even clearer. Theory is necessary for learning magic, but if those skills can't be applied in practice, they're meaningless. Her gaze sharpened, full of authority. Most importantly, there's no guarantee our students won't be targeted again. She lifted a hand to her chin, eyes thoughtful. I believe we must ensure our students can defend themselves. Ludger replied without backing down. I agree, but you could have informed me of that in writing. Surely you have another assignment in mind for me. The woman smiled brightly. Oh my. You're good, very adept at reading people. She cleared her throat and returned to seriousness. Yes, I want you to take on the upcoming beast summoning class. He immediately wondered, wouldn't one of the usual professors for that course suffice? Rector Elisa Willow chuckled sympathetically, as if fully understanding. They'll be busy rearranging schedules too. Besides, I plan to reduce your theory classes so you'll have the time. Ludger was silent for a moment, not responding right away to the unexpected offer. Elisa tilted her head, her sharp smile unchanged. Frankly, in the current situation, hiring an unvetted outsider could be risky. Besides, I hear you already teach some practical magic. That led me to think you'd be well suited to teach the beast summoning class. Of course, since you're in charge of the planning office, I'll lighten that workload for you. After a moment's consideration, Ludger accepted the request. A serious look flashed across his face. All right, but may I teach the class the way I see fit? This was a demand, not a plea. Elisa Willow rose, looking pleased and respectful. Of course, I'm very grateful, she answered decisively. The rector moved toward the desk, a sly smile on her lips. Ah, one more thing. Could you look over this? A thick file was placed on the desk. Ludger reached for it, his expression shifting from cool to serious. What's this about? Elisa stared at him, her golden eyes flashing coldly. There were also incidents here while you were in the capital. So far I've let them slide because I needed someone to reign in the nobility, but this time he's clearly crossed the line. Ludger stood straight and stared at a middle-aged man who looked aggressive and terrified at once. The man's hands trembled as he gripped the file in anger. It seems you've colluded with outsiders to steal internal information, Ludger said calmly, his gaze like a blade. Is it because your influence here has weakened since you were forced to sever ties? The man, Professor Hugo Bertego, clenched his fists, veins bulging, his face contorted in utter panic. How did they find out? Ludger stared at Hugo with a half-smile full of sarcasm and authority. Don't worry, Hugo Bertego. You'll keep your professorship at Serin. What? Hugo stammered, completely taken aback. Ludger explained in a measured but calculating tone. Despite your current situation, if you were expelled from Serin, the noble factions would certainly protest. Besides, that would alert the public to internal problems at Serin. Ludger stared at Professor Hugo with an emotionless voice. However, your salary and research funds will be cut, and you'll be stripped of all former authority. Hugo gritted his teeth. Anger and helplessness left him speechless. After a moment of shock, Hugo tried to regain his composure. I'm grateful. So what's next? He challenged. Even if you topple me, another like me will just take my place. Unfazed by that veiled threat, Ludger answered calmly. You don't need to worry about that. We found a suitable replacement. Just then, someone opened the door and entered. From the doorway, a man in a neat uniform coat with blue hair and glasses stepped in. It was Professor Chris Benamor. Professor Hugo stammered, his face showing pure horror. Professor Chris Benamor? Ludger continued, ignoring Hugo's fury. He's generally mild-mannered, so perfect to replace you. Hugo's anger reached its peak. All hope of retaining any power evaporated. He trembled violently. You bastard. Ludger watched Hugo Bertego turn his back and trudge heavily out of the room. Shall we just let him go like that? He might do something reckless. Professor Chris Benamor's voice came from behind Ludger. Ludger turned, eyes cold and controlled. Nothing matters to him more than self-preservation, so nothing will happen. Ludger told Professor Chris Benamor, who would take over the position taken from Hugo. By the way, congratulations. This post is now yours. Chris replied with a mild huff. Don't get me wrong. I never wanted this position. Recalling the incident in the capital, Chris said. That event made me realize something. This world is quite dangerous now, and our students are far too weak against it. He bent his head, speaking with concern. How much longer must we endure these pointless fights between factions? The students' safety matters far more. That's why I accepted your proposal, Ludger replied. Chris turned to leave, not forgetting one last remark. Anyway, the debt I owe you has been repaid by this. Ludger immediately asked, puzzled. What debt? Chris pushed his glasses and walked off flamboyantly. You worked hard so I could meet Miss Bellaluna again. Ludger went dark-faced and could only reply helplessly. Oh, right. But a strange thought crossed his mind. What does he see in her? A few weeks later, at the Serin training ground, under bright sunlight, a group of students were sprinting on the track, small figures drilling their fitness. Red-haired student Tessie panted, forcing herself to keep up with brown-haired Aiden. It's so hard. Why do we have to do this any longer? Aiden looked back with an encouraging grin. Hang in a bit longer. Your body will adapt and you'll be fine. Up ahead, dark green-haired student Flora ran at an astonishing pace. Cheryl, running behind, panted and cried out, F. Flora, what the hell? How are you running so well? You're not even out of breath. Flora continued running seriously, surprised even by herself. She felt a change. Not only my endurance, but my magical ability has suddenly increased. If I had to guess, it's probably related to why my hair changed color. Ludger stood on the training ground, watching the trainees practice. A blonde male student surged forward at speed. A male student and a female student approached Ludger, faces full of confusion and protest. Teacher, you want us to run around the training ground? The male student asked, clearly upset. Not only that, You want us to do it while boosting our physical strength until our mana is depleted and we're exhausted? The female student added skeptically. Aren't beast courses always taught indoors because they require meditation? Ludger answered calmly. Usually, yes. He turned back to the group of first and second year students. You know, the beast summoning course normally doesn't start until the third year. But it's very difficult for first and second years to achieve the same results as third years using the same method. Ludger looked them dead on, his gaze like a dagger, showing no mercy. This method may be harder than the other, but I intend to teach you a much faster approach. Therefore, from now on you'll undergo beast summoning training like real soldiers. The students recoiled in horror. Military-style beast summoning training? Ludger explained, none of you can sense your beast yet, but it has been inside you like an egg since you began learning magic. To find and hatch that egg, you must push your body to exhaustion. He pointed and ordered, run until you're utterly spent, and during recovery pay attention to every second mana refills from the depths. Repeat that process, and when you succeed you'll be able to sense your beast. Ludger issued a final warning that drained the color from their faces. If anyone stops or sneaks off, I'll personally supervise their private training after class, so give it your all. Hearing that, the students trembled in fear. After the students were exhausted, Ludger allowed them to rest. All exhausted students, gather here, he signaled. While you rest, I'll teach you some simple theory. A group of students collapsed onto the grass. Ludger stood before them, staring directly at Tessie and Aiden. Beast summoning is performed through mana, so although beasts aren't living organisms, they still possess will and real existence. That's because a beast forms after being imbued with a caster's will over a long time. Tessie offered a tired hypothesis, looking up. So, in a way, beasts are essentially artificial creatures? Ludger replied. Depending on your perspective, you could say that. But currently we tend to treat them as a natural phenomenon, Ludger explained in a low voice. To define them as artificial, someone would need to actively create them with the intent of them existing. But beasts cannot be created in that manner. Aside from beasts, there have been attempts to create golems by infusing souls and to manufacture artificial elementals, but none have succeeded. Suddenly whispers erupted around them, and a student hesitantly cried out, I did it. Beside Flora stood a massive dark blue leopard. Ludger turned to see Flora standing beside a towering, majestic creature. Cheryl, behind her, gazed with delighted awe and exclaimed, Wow, it's Flora. She's the first to succeed. Beside Flora stood a massive dark blue leopard. Ludger approached with calm steps. You achieved it far quicker than I expected. Flora looked up, her dark green ponytail swaying, eyes full of pride. She responded with absolute confidence. Of course, I was born for this. He then shifted to a stern, cautioning tone. But don't grow complacent just because the process was important. The real challenges begin after you summon it. Ludger leaned in slightly. She understood. As Ludger left, he passed Flora and whispered, Well done, which left her slightly stunned. He curtly ordered the other students, If you've seen enough, get back to running. Yes, sir. Flora turned and, suddenly, smiled at him. A few days later, the number of successful students continued to rise, surprising even Ludger. Iona also quickly summoned a sword, leaving Aiden impressed. Tessie exclaimed in amazement, I can't believe our class has 2 students whose beasts are rare tools. Leo looked over, slightly envious, and said, Wow, that's definitely a way to draw everyone's attention. Tessie also successfully summoned a sunflower, while Leo's beast was a cat curled around his neck matching his hair color. He stood with his arms crossed, scanning the training ground with a calculating expression. Honestly, this exceeded my expectations. Who would have thought they'd all manage it in such a short time? Around them murmurs rose again. Lin, is that your beast? Lin looked up, slightly surprised. Yes, I think so, but this form. Arendir also looked up and replied, It isn't really the form of a tool. It's just a geometric shape. Her beast is a glowing golden raven. Arendir hesitated as he stared at the polyhedron. Huh? Moreover, its shape keeps changing. Lin was puzzled too. Yes, I think we'd better ask the professor. Before she could finish, the polyhedron suddenly flared brilliantly, its light intensifying violently. Then came a piercing sound, like glass shattering across the sky. A powerful radiance burst forth, forcing the students to shield their eyes. The other students panicked as their beasts began flapping wildly. Another student screamed, Ah, why is my beast acting like this all of a sudden? Ludger stared at the scene unfolding on the training ground, his eyes flashing with gravity. He immediately sprang forward, analyzing inwardly. The newly summoned beasts are reacting violently to the wave emitted by that beast. I must suppress it with my own beast to calm it down. A powerful, terrifying energy suddenly erupted from Ludger, engulfing half the training ground. He chanted, Aeter Nocturnus. A pitch-black darkness surged after him. Students nearby trembled and whispered in fear, Is that Professor Ludger's beast? It's covering half the training ground. Flora stood within that dark mana stream, eyes wide. She thought to herself, could this be the scent I smelled at the start of term? Ludger walked calmly through the panicked crowd, his voice authoritative as he quelled the chaos. Everyone, hold your positions. He continued toward the center of the disturbance. While suppressing the energy from the polyhedron, he breathed a quiet relief. Fortunately, Lin's beast showed no other reaction. Ludger stared at the polyhedron now shrouded by darkness. It glittered but no longer blazed. Whether it's afraid of Aeter Nocturnus or not, I'm relieved. The incident was temporarily under control. He moved closer to Lin, who was kneeling on the ground, breathing heavily from exhaustion and fear. Ludger's darkness swept gently past her. Lin, are you all right? He began. Lin lifted her head, tears of deep blue streaking her face. Her eyes shone like stars. Professor, her voice trembling with despair and confusion, she stared at Ludger with a pained, profound gaze. Why did you let me see those emotions? In that instant, Ludger's expression darkened. The calm, controlled look he usually wore vanished, replaced by an icy, hyper-alert stare. He straightened, facing the crying student. This unexpected event had shattered Professor Ludger's composure and calculations. Lin sat there dazed, eyes blazing, tears streaming down her cheeks. She sobbed. Why did you show me those feelings? Ludger's expression darkened. Lin kept crying, shouting, Why? Do I feel guilty? Lin's body slumped forward. She fainted, and Ludger stood there watching her. Ludger carried her up and told the other students that today's lesson was over. In the infirmary, Lin lay on a sickbed. Arendir asked anxiously, Professor, are you sure Lin is all right? Ludger replied calmly, Yes, she just fainted. He turned to Arendir. You can go now. Don't forget you have another class. Arendir hesitated. But, this happened in my class, so it's my responsibility, Ludger said firmly. Arendir finally nodded. Yes, I understand. No sooner had Arendir left than the blanket on the bed began to tremble. Lin slowly opened her eyes. Ludger stepped closer to the bed. Lin groaned and then sat up. What? I fainted? Ludger answered. I see you're awake. Did I say anything rude before I passed out? Lin asked, voice full of worry. She felt she'd said something to him before collapsing. Ludger looked her straight in the eye. You didn't say a word, so don't worry. He explained further. You fainted simply from the shock of summoning a familiar for the first time. That happens because a newborn familiar reacts sensitively when it first sees the world. Lin's blue eyes widened in surprise, a hint of fear on her face. What? Familiars behave like that? She asked on. Is mine also a rare type? Ludger calmly. Yes. Worry overwhelmed Lin again. She panicked on the bed. Oh no. There's so much I still want to do. How could I leave the world so soon? AAAHH. Ludger reached out, motioning for her to calm down. Calm down. The example I gave was a tragedy caused by a familiar being mistreated constantly. As long as you treat your familiar well, that won't happen. After she settled, Ludger changed the subject. You said you have many things you want to do. Specifically, what are they? Lin, slightly embarrassed. What? Oh, there are so many it's hard to choose. Then her face brightened, a radiant smile like a beam of light in the room. Oh, I want to become a magic researcher and study spells people don't yet know about. I want to help people like me who don't even know what kind of magic they have. Ludger looked at her, eyes lowering, face serious. I understand. Becoming a magic researcher isn't an easy path. He continued, his voice carrying a stern warning. You need a comprehensive understanding of magic, and you'll have to write countless papers. You must not only keep up with theory, but your own magical achievements must not fall behind. To put it bluntly, you'll have to reach the pinnacle of intellect to become a magic researcher. Each word weighed on her mind. Lin hung her head, her small face full of disappointment. That sounds much harder than I thought. Ludger smiled reassuringly. Well, you've kept up with the theory pretty well, so I'm sure you can achieve your dream if you work hard. Lin's eyes lit with hope. Really? But after a moment, anxiety surfaced again. Still, there will surely be times you feel powerless and want to give up. She hesitated. How did you get through those times, Professor? Or maybe that never happened to you? Ludger paused, then spoke softly and distantly, almost a confession. I never got through it. I simply endured and pushed myself forward. Ludger left, walking down the corridor with thoughts swirling in his head. It happened in an instant, but the power of Lin's judging Ma-eye had surged in that moment and pierced the seal charm. He walked along the grand hallway. The only explanation he could think of was that it was related to the familiar she had summoned. No one had ever possessed both non-elemental magic and the judging Ma-eye at the same time. This situation couldn't be assessed with existing knowledge. Unwanted power is essentially a curse. At the very least, we have to find a solution for non-elemental magic. Lost in thought, his steps suddenly faltered. Out of nowhere, a figure appeared and blocked his way. It was Freuden Wohlberg, his face full of anger and worry. He shouted, I heard everything. What did you do to Lin? Ludger remained calm. She only fainted temporarily. You don't need to be so reactive. Freuden snapped back in anger. She fainted in your class. Do you think I'll just take your word for it? He stepped up to Ludger, voice rough with fury. How long do you intend to torment Lin? Isn't what you did to her mother enough? How dare you show your face to her? Ludger looked Freuden straight in the eye, his gaze cold, and replied in a warning tone. Don't prattle about things you don't understand. Freuden, stunned. What? Standing before Freuden in the bright light from the window, Ludger spoke a terrible truth. Lin. He looked directly into Freuden's eyes, his own darkening. Doesn't have much time left. Freuden was stunned, his blue eyes widening. What? Freuden stared out the window as Ludger's figure receded from view, recalling the teacher's words. You must know Lin possesses non-elemental magic. Because that power is spiraling out of control, it will destroy her body. Mages not strong enough to contain that power are certain to die. Their average lifespan is around 25 years. Even if they live longer, they rarely reach 30. And during that time they endure such intense pain that they often beg for death. He remembered the pained look on Ludger's face when he said, to the point that even a mother who loves her only daughter must ask someone to help the girl leave this world and be freed from the pain. So what have you done for Lin, kid? All this time I've been watching her, searching for a way to prevent her ending up the same way. Freuden clenched his fists. After hearing this, he felt even more helpless. Suddenly a voice echoed from behind. You're more passionate than I thought. Freuden turned to look. Flora stepped up beside the dazed Freuden. He looked at her and asked, were you eavesdropping? Flora stepped forward confidently and replied, I didn't mean to, but I overheard it. Flora leaned against the window with a hint of mockery on her face. I didn't know you cared about Lin so much. I never thought you'd like anyone. Freuden shot back. What about you? You seem very concerned about Ludger Cherish. Are you really okay with him worrying more about other students? Flora closed her eyes, a fleeting peace passing over her features. Maybe I used to be bothered, but not anymore. From now on, I understand better what he's up against. Freuden glanced at her, his expression more mature. You've changed. Flora conceded. Well, I can't keep acting like a child forever, can I? He looked out the window and replied softly, no. I suppose so too. Ludger returned to his office, the door creaked open, and he was slightly startled to hear a greeting. Hello, Professor Ludger. An elderly man sat on the red sofa, smiling. Long time no see. How have you been? The man was Hyber Katatushan, the third Duke of the Katatushan family. Ludger stepped forward and faced the elderly man directly. Ludger asked, what brings you here, Your Grace? Duke Hyber laughed heartily. Ha ha ha. Well, of course I came because I missed you. Duke Hyber leaned back in his chair with a sly look. I've heard you're now in charge of the planning office. You're climbing the ladder fast. He asked, but did the headmaster allow you to take on another role? Ludger sat in the opposite chair and calmly replied, well, that was introduced by the headmaster from the start. Hyber laughed loudly, smirking with amusement. Oh, I misspoke. I wasn't talking about that. I'm referring to the back alley of Redderbelka, Oliver owner. Ludger's gaze sharpened. So he knows about that, Ludger explained. The headmaster doesn't interfere with what Professor Serin does off the clock. Hyber's tone shifted and he smiled wider. Ah, what an ideal workplace. Not only is the pay good, you can take on other jobs too. He stroked his beard and announced proudly, then allow me to introduce myself properly. I am the former director of the Information Bureau and head of Nightcrawler, an organization I oversee in the Empire. I am Hyberkata Tushan. Ludger regarded him, a little surprised. Director of the Bureau and head of Nightcrawler. I suppose he's no ordinary old man, being the third lord of a duchy. Still, that's astonishing. Ludger asked, warily. So, are you here to arrest me? Duke Hyber laughed again. Arrest you? Ha ha. Why would I do that? He pointed at Ludger and explained. You've cleaned up the streets and dealt with that terrorist headache. He added with a frown. You even played a major role in the recent incident in the capital. If I arrested you, the Empire would suffer. Hyber lowered his voice. Those things happen in the underworld. It's par for the course there. Ludger blinked in mild surprise. But if you had that kind of information, why didn't you know about the incident in the capital beforehand? Hyber waved a hand. My word, the palace is there. If people like us intervened in the capital, it would shake the royal family's power. Hyber's expression turned serious. In other words, we don't hesitate to pursue any threat to the Empire outside the capital. He added, in fact, that's why I want to entrust you with a request. Ludger, focusing on the point, asked, what kind of request? Duke Hyber looked at Ludger with a cryptic smile. I heard you'll participate in the upcoming Magic Night event. He stated bluntly, I want you to kill someone there. That night, in a narrow alley of Retterbelka, Ludger walked along the cobblestone path under a pale moon. The old man really gave me an annoying task. Ludger suddenly stopped. There was a sound behind him. He turned, eyes sharp. He turned his head, surveying the alley with a cold gaze. A group of figures moved lightly into view. He guessed. They are. A band cloaked in blue, swords in hand, advanced toward him. The hunters Bellaluna mentioned? Ludger thought to himself in surprise. I didn't expect them so early, but why are they after me, and not Bellaluna? Ludger stared at the group. What do you want with me? I haven't done anything to make the elves my enemies. Without a word, one hunter leapt forward and attacked Ludger with his sword. Ludger activated magic. A purple energy swirled around his hand. Silver bands began to flow down, and he said, seems this can't be settled with words anymore. He focused, eyes like blades. Suddenly a fist swung one. Hunter was sent sprawling, his body crashing onto the cobblestones. All the cloaked men watched in stunned shock. A powerful hand, wrapped in shimmering mana, spoke. Perfect timing. The silver bands on Ludger's wrist also formed into a razor-sharp sword. That commanding figure was none other than Pantos. Pantos told Ludger, I sensed intent to kill and rushed over. He frowned. But they're no match. Ludger replied, indeed. Since you're here, lend me a hand. After a moment's thought, he ordered, take them all down except the one who seems to be the leader. Pantos replied with a firm look. Consider it done. The base door suddenly burst open, a piercing sound tearing through the silence. The ringleader of the pursuers was thrown to the ground, startling Bellaluna, who wore the lab's white coat. Flustered, she asked, Boss, who is that? Ludger stood there, outwardly calm but with eyes that hid deep displeasure. I'll answer after you explain first. Pantos, having just finished cleaning up outside, casually brushed his hands as if unconcerned about the figure sprawled on the floor or the recent chaos. Ludger recalled the blood and other corpses strewn across the cold ground outside. He demanded, didn't you say it would take a long time for those trackers to find this place? What happened? Bellaluna's small face registered extreme surprise. I'm wondering that too. There's no way they could have arrived so soon. The intruder, despite the pain, forced her head up to stare at Bellaluna, fear and fury blazing in her eyes. Ah, so you're the one who dared approach our holy tree, she shouted, her elven eyes wide with hatred. You're a traitor to your own kind. The accusation made Bellaluna shiver. Ludger stepped closer, sat down, pressing himself into the captive's view, his gaze cold as if to pierce her soul. Oh, so you didn't come after Bellaluna? Then why did you attack me? He asked in return. The elven girl clenched her teeth, tense but refusing to utter a word. Ludger stood up straight, concluding, it seems she won't speak easily. He turned to Bellaluna and ordered, make this elf talk. You mean, you want me to do that? Bellaluna froze at the sudden request. Ludger gave her an icy glance. Don't tell me you're reluctant to interrogate one of your own. Hearing that, Bellaluna seemed to regain her scientific curiosity. She smiled slyly, eyes clouded by curiosity. No, not at all. She shook her head. Actually, I'm curious how the drug I made will affect an elf. She held up a vial of green liquid and shook it lightly, producing a mischievous clink. Ludger watched silently, slightly unnerved, relieved she was on his side. The bound elven girl saw the vial and began to tremble. What are they going to do to me? Do they want me to drink that? She stammered in fear, trying to back away. Bellaluna chuckled. Oh, don't worry. It's just a dose to make you tell the truth. How can you do this to your own kind? The girl pleaded. No. After a while, the girl sat up straight, her face emotionless, answering questions like a machine. Ludger began. Name and reason you came here? The intruder, now a shadow of herself, replied, My name is Galleon Shade Warden. I came to punish the traitor who secretly approached the sacred world tree. Ludger sat upright in his chair, arms crossed, staring at Galleon. I've heard your people need quite some time to assemble. How could you act so quickly? Galleon answered flatly. The Leafer clan leader saw the intruder tending the tree. She immediately invoked authority to summon us, the Shadow Wardens. Our goal was to capture the intruder of the sacred world tree, and to reclaim another world tree that we hadn't known about. Ludger shot a quick look at Bellaluna, causing her to nervously turn her face away. Galleon continued. When we reached the capital, humans had tightened security around the tree. So some stayed to monitor, while others came here to punish the traitor. Ludger pressed, I understand your purpose in coming here. But why were you following me instead of the traitor? Galleon fell silent to ponder. Ludger stared patiently, waiting for the truth serum's answer. Plante. Galleon spoke, revealing the real reason. We could smell the scent of the former World Tree caretakers, the Plante clan, on you. This information stunned Ludger. He wondered why he smelled like the tree's former caretakers. He asked suspiciously, Are you sure there's no mistake? Galleon, still expressionless, affirmed, We've been tracking you for a long time. There's no mistake here. Then Galleon revealed something that made Ludger shudder. The Plante bloodline should be very strong, but the scent is strangely faint, as if diluted with impurities. Impurities? Mixed blood? In a flash, the face of a young brown-haired girl with glasses popped into Ludger's mind. A terrifying truth emerged. My real name is Serena Plante. Ludger quickly composed himself, his face returning to coldness. He moved on to the next question with renewed pressure. Are you still searching for surviving members of the plant family? Galleon replied, Yes. Any living plant must be assassinated. Ludger sat cross-legged, his gaze sharper. Didn't the Leafer clan seize all authority? Why do you persist in hunting the Plante family? Galleon stared straight ahead, eyes void. Because of the ownership of the World Tree. Galleon continued in an even tone. The World Tree contains a vast amount of energy. But 500 years ago, the plant family fled while still holding the ownership. So we are still searching for plant members to reclaim the World Tree's ownership. Ludger listened, tension in his eyes. I see. He knew he had to act to stop them from tracking Sedina, at least for now. Ludger turned back to the prisoner. You said you found me by scent. Is there any way to hide that smell? Galleon, still expressionless, offered a cold solution. A strong scent, like the overpowering perfumes humans make, is enough to mask the Plante scent. Ludger nodded. Understood. Thanks for the information. He ordered, Pantos. Deal with this elf in that alley to clean up once and for all. Understood. Pantos replied. He stood, decisively grabbed the tied Galleon with one hand, and lifted her off the floor. Pantos asked, What do you intend to do about those in the capital? Ludger answered, sounding slightly tired. Going there myself would be too troublesome, so I'll have to send someone in my place. He gave a knowing smile. Fortunately, I have just the person for the job. At midnight, in a house in the capital Lindebrunn, 2 hooded shadow wardens lurked in a dark room. Beside them lay a bedsheet stained with blood. One complained, Why must we stay in a human's house? Can't we dump this corpse? It's starting to smell like decay. He covered his nose. The other replied tensely, We could be discovered if we do, so bear with it a little longer. We'll come back after checking. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through. Both jolted. A figure appeared, stepping through the window as if from nowhere. Cloaked, face hidden in shadow, he knelt on one knee, radiating a chilling aura. The figure was none other than Lord Phacius. His voice rang with mockery. How unfortunate. A bluish-purple magical light flashed in his hand, brightly illuminating the room. It's too late for you to run now. The 2 hooded men flinched, terrified. Who are you? Light flashed intensely, engulfing the room. The next day, in Ludger's office, Sedina, his pupil, stood there. The bespectacled, round-faced girl looked confusedly at her palm. Professor, what is this? In her palm was a small shimmering pink-purple vial of perfume, Ludger explained. It's a bottle of perfume, as you can see. Hearing that, Sedina immediately panicked. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I smelled bad. The girl awkwardly sniffed herself. Ludger softened his tone, sighed. No, I didn't give it to you for that reason, so don't worry. He added, I just thought I should give you something to show my appreciation for assisting me. Sedina, surprised, widened her eyes. It's a gift? And in case you intend to use it, don't use it sparingly, Ludger said as he set his coffee cup down. Sedina shivered at his serious tone, then smiled. Oh yes, thank you, Professor. Ludger looked at Sedina, pondering. This gift would help her avoid pursuit, at least temporarily. However, it was clear Sedina knew little about her Plante family. Perhaps he should ask Professor Virano about the Plante family. But he recalled her reaction, which made him somewhat hesitant. Ludger lifted his coffee cup and took a sip. This coffee tastes good. Did you buy a new bean? Sedina replied cheerfully, eyes bright. Yes, I used Nessarian beans grown in the assistant's room. He set the cup down. Nessarian coffee? I thought it would be hard to grow that in the assistant's room. Sedina explained with an innocent smile. Maybe it's because of my elven blood, but any plant I grow does very well. Ludger looked at the girl, thoughtful. After dealing with many elves, he judged this was a unique power Sedina possessed. The ability to promote vigorous plant growth was likely a latent power from plant blood. Moreover, judging from plants used to make paper, Sedina's expertise in paper magic was not mere irregular magic but an inheritance of ancient legacy. Seeing Professor Ludger still pensive, she asked, Would you like another cup, or do you need anything else? Ludger leaned back in his chair. No, that's enough. Drinking more than 1 cup a day isn't good. And preparations for the upcoming Mystic Night are nearly complete, so I have no tasks for you. Ludger checked his watch, stood to leave, then paused. Oh right, I almost forgot. Sedina, if you have no urgent matters, you can go home early today. Sedina blinked. Oh, are you going out, Professor? Ludger replied, eyes forward. Yes, I have someone I need to visit. At the gate, a small blonde girl struggled along under the weight of a towering stack of gift boxes. This is ridiculous, she grumbled. Don't they know sending so much stuff is hard for whoever handles it? She was Betty, Casey's assistant. A figure approaching made her freeze. Betty looked up. Oh, hello, sir. Are you visiting? I'm sorry, but Casey isn't well enough to receive guests right now. She stared at the man before her, then finally realized. Oh, you're Ludger Cherish, right? Betty exclaimed. I recognized you because Casey talks about you a lot. Ludger answered calmly. That's me. And you must be her assistant, he asked, looking at the towering pile of boxes. But what exactly are you carrying? Betty sighed. Fans send her gifts every day, so I'm taking away the things she doesn't need. She shook her head in exasperation. It's as if they don't realize these gifts are a nuisance. Ludger, his face slightly stern, asked, Sounds difficult. You said she isn't well enough for visitors. Is she sick? Betty replied, eyes puzzled. I'm not sure. The doctor says she's not ill, but why is she in bed all day? Betty answered, confused. I'm not sure. The doctor says she's not ill, but why is she in bed all day? She looked at Ludger with pleading eyes. But you know Casey well, Mr. Cherish? Could you keep an eye on her while I go out? Ludger paused, looked at the pile of boxes and Betty's worried face, and nodded. All right. He watched Betty carry the tall stack away. That kid was surely a successful specimen from the steel choir like ARPA. If the soul in that child somehow was the soul of Arte. He quickly shook his head, snuffing out that faint hope, then turned back inside. Casey slowly opened her eyes. The first image she saw was the silhouette of a familiar man. Weakly, she realized someone was there. The figure grew clearer. Ludger sat by the bedside, looking down at the girl lying there. He asked, You're awake? Casey exclaimed in surprise. Why are you here? Ludger teased lightly. I'm surprised too. Casey Selmore, famous, reduced to suffering so she can't get out of bed. Casey looked at Ludger hesitantly, her eyes a little sad and tired. I'm sorry, she whispered. Ludger, exasperated, closed his eyes and asked again, What are you talking about? Casey looked at him, emotions suddenly breaking free. I found out the truth about you, why you did it, and that you accepted all the accusations on my behalf. Everything. Tears trickled down, her face flushed. I'm sorry for harming your reputation. I've wanted to tell you that for a long time. Ludger looked at her, eyes resolute. You don't need to apologize. I chose that path, and I have no intention of denying it. Whatever my purpose was, the fact remains that I became a villain with blood on my hands. You not standing idly by was entirely right and fair. He continued slowly. Moreover, I deceived and used you so you'd try to stop me. I am the one who should apologize, not you. Casey remained in bed, tears still on her lashes. But, anyway, Ludger cut in, his tone softening as he leaned back and crossed his arms. Ah, if you're so insistent on apologizing, then I accept your apology. I forgive you. Casey was left speechless. She smiled, feeling a weight lift. Casey chuckled softly, a light laugh escaping. Oh, my God, you're still so proud. That evening, the doorbell rang at Ludger's mansion. Sitting in his study with thin-framed glasses, he looked up, wondering who it could be. Ludger went to the door and opened it. Outside stood a woman with pink hair wearing a suit. Hello, Professor Ludger, Professor Selena said. He stood in the doorway, tilting his head slightly. Professor Selena? What brings you here so late at night? Selena smiled. Oh, shouldn't I be here? It's just that both of us have been very busy during the week, she said, then gave a radiant smile as flames began to blaze around her. Ludger flinched at the sight of the bright red flames. Besides, Selena tilted her head, her eyes glowing red. Who else could I show this to but you? She smiled seductively, flirtatious. Her pink hair now turned black. Ludger stepped back slightly, his gaze cold and unwavering. Why are you here, Helia? The girl said nothing, merely curled her lips in a challenging smirk. A black-blue magical light flickered around her. For a moment, Professor Selena's image dissolved, replaced by Helia's beaming face. Oh my. Helia swept a hand through her two-toned hair with confidence. You found me right away. But this time, aren't you at least a little surprised? Ludger closed his eyes. The eyes behind his glasses seemed to be assessing. I watched her final moments with my own eyes. There's no way she'd be standing before me now. He turned and stepped inside, not forgetting to order, go in before anyone sees. I'll hear what you have to say inside. Helia shrugged excitedly, a mischievous smile spreading. Perfect. I don't mind at all. The room was compact yet elegant. Helia immediately claimed the red velvet sofa, settling as if it were her own. Aren't you going to offer me coffee? She asked half-heartedly. I'm out, Ludger replied bluntly, moving toward the coffee table. But even if I had some, I wouldn't give it to you. Helia pouted and snorted. Hey, that's no fun. How about being a bit nicer to me? Ludger turned to her, his expression unchanged. No matter how friendly I appear, it's still a hollow relationship if the intent isn't sincere. Helia smiled faintly and tilted her head. But the more serious a relationship, the harder it is to break up. She propped her chin on her hand, eyes glittering challengingly. Isn't it much better to have a looser relationship, even if it's superficial? Ludger shot a cold glance. In any case, I have no intention of getting close to a demon, he said decisively. However, if you prove useful to me, I might reconsider. Helia's eyes lit up. She snapped her fingers and winked. Aha, you should have said that from the start. I'll give you a useful piece of information. She leaned forward, whispering mysteriously. Zero Order was actually very weak at first. Helia continued, her gaze deepening. Demons like us can easily use authority power from the start, so we're fairly strong. I'm not saying he lacked that power himself, but he started at 0 while others started at 100. Ludger stood silently, listening as she spoke on. I suppose that's the unique point of the learning authority. Hearing this, Ludger was a bit surprised. Learning authority? Helia went on, her voice resonant and impressive. His beginning was unremarkable, but he can learn quickly, memorize, and grasp all kinds of magic. In other words, he can pick up anything easily. He can become stronger than anyone in an instant, and time means nothing to him, because he has the infinite learning ability everyone covets. At that point, Zero Order was perhaps more dangerous than any other demon. The learning authority's power was terrifying, letting him gain strength and knowledge rapidly, bypassing the time others need to master things. Suddenly, the ring on her hand glowed. She glanced at it, as if recalling something. Helia sprang up from the sofa, looking slightly groggy. Oh, right. I'm here to tell you there's a meeting tonight. Wow, you're giving notice early, Ludger replied with a sarcastic tone, unsurprised by the news. Helia beamed. Well, I'm off, see you there. She waved without a hint of deference. Ludger remained silent as he watched her leave. In the closed meeting room, shrouded in purple-black energy, a cold, authoritative voice announced. So the assassination of Casey Selmore failed. Another voice answered irritably. It's not like we have no other chance. Next time we'll just send someone stronger. A tall shadow with long hair slowly entered the room, dark magic swirling around him. It was none other than Professor Ludger Cherish. Someone turned to him and greeted, "Oh, perfect timing, arrogant Lord Ludger Cherish." He continued, his tone sarcastic, "You disrupted the terrorist act in the capital and even got a reward. You're not seriously keeping up this professor act, are you?" Ludger glowed coldly in the dark. "That's a foolish question. All I do is clear whatever stands in my way." He cast a look of undisguised contempt at someone. "If you can get a reward for catching a few pests, I'll do it. I'm more curious what the Liberation Army actually gained from this operation, given the effort you put in, Nikolai." Nikolai fell silent. His eyes narrowed in the shadows, full of anger. Nikolai regained his composure and laughed loudly. "Ha ha ha. Absurd. That's not the whole army." Ludger sat back in his chair, judging that at least Nikolai knew when to step back. He stretched out a hand. A wisp of purple, black smoke curled above his palm. "It's a pity my preparations failed, but if Black Dawn benefits in the end, it's acceptable." A blaze of purple energy filled the room. From the opposite seat, a shadow gradually materialized. Zero Order, eyes flashing beneath a half mask, spoke with cold authority. "Ah, you're all here." He looked over the seated shadows. "I'm sure you expected this, but I summoned you to introduce the newly recruited First Order." Zero Order signaled. A vortex of pitch-black darkness erupted from the center of the table. "Now, you may introduce yourself." A girl at the table widened her eyes as the new member appeared in the center. Helia blinked and smiled brightly. "I am the new First Order, Helia." She tossed her chin, a purple-golden aura sparkling as if to demand attention. "I look forward to working with you all." The meeting room fell silent. One member thought disdainfully, "What's wrong with her? Does she think this is some place called Black Dawn?" Another member also disliked her, but since Zero Order chose her, there was no reason to doubt her ability. A female member spoke up. "Ha, you want to work with us? Just don't drag us down. This is Zero Order's decision, so I won't oppose her appointment. But handle your own duties." Helia blinked, apparently surprised by the cold attitude. "Huh?" Another member warned the previous speaker, "Don't be disrespectful in front of Zero Order, Bentman." Bentman shrugged, his voice bitter. "Disrespect? I'm merely stating my position." Helia, intrigued, smirked and moved closer to the woman. "Oh, your name is Bentman?" The purple smoke around her swirled gently. "Seems like here you can use real names." Bentman was stunned. "What?" Helia pointed at Bentman. "I know that name." Her eyes narrowed. "That's the name of the Leifer clan leader in the Elf Kingdom." Bentman flinched, unable to hide his surprise. "What? Hey, how did you—" The other members, upon hearing this, couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. One member turned to Bentman, skeptical. "What's this, Bentman? You're an elf?" Another, apparently a scientist, looked extremely astonished. "Oh ho ho, my goodness. Not just an elf, but the clan leader." Another added, "I've never met her in person, so I didn't know." What a shock. Bentman froze without answering. Bentman sighed. "All right, fine," she admitted, her voice losing its earlier edge. "I can tell you all now." As she said, "I am the leader of the Leifer clan." Then she turned her attention to Helia, anger barely concealed. "Helia, you must visit the kingdom sometime. I'll give you a warm surprise welcome." Helia, beaming. "Oh, really? I'll definitely stop by." Ludger remained silent, observing. Today he had gained some unexpected information thanks to her. Now I know she is the one searching for Sedina. Zero Order raised a hand to silence everyone and cut in. "All right, enough everyone. Sit down, Helia. Actually, there's another reason I summoned you today." He continued, "I must make a long journey." A member suddenly sprang up, shock written across his face. "You'll be absent?" The leader Zero Order replied calmly to the astonishment. "I will return quickly." He folded his arms. "I will also maintain this space, so if you have anything to discuss, feel free to use it." Then he looked at that person and added, "Your plan will soon succeed as well, Leslie. I hope you make your wish come true there." Leslie flinched at those words. He then bowed formally, showing absolute submission. "Yes, my lord, I will accomplish it." Ludger glanced at Leslie, thinking to himself, "They will gather at the upcoming Mystic Night. In that case, we may confront him. I must prepare for my objective. In any case, if necessary, I will fight him." Leslie also felt the gaze fixed on him and turned to look at Ludger. A few days later, a steam train sped along the tracks, cutting through the verdant forest. In the first-class carriage, Ludger sat on a luxurious sofa while the boy Arpa stood by the window, staring out in wonder. Ludger looked at the boy, his tone a touch warmer than usual. Arpa, this is your first time in first class, isn't it? Arpa kept his eyes on the rushing scenery, excitement sparkling. Yes, when I traveled with Pantos, we had to share a cramped room. Briefly, Arpa is an automaton. Few know he was once a real boy named Arte, Ludger's close pupil when he taught in the kingdom of Delica. After Arte was killed in a kidnapping, Ludger saved his soul and placed it into a finely crafted mechanical body. Their bond is a silent pact of salvation and responsibility. Arpa turned to Ludger, curious. But am I allowed to attend even though I'm not a mage? Ludger sat with folded arms and replied calmly, anyone with an invitation may attend Mystic Night. And you'll accompany me as a guest, so there will be no problem. The clatter of the train wheels reminded him of his meeting with Duke Hyber. You want me to kill someone at Mystic Night? To ask a Serin professor to be an assassin? Hyber frowned slightly. My goodness, it seems my explanation wasn't clear enough. He clarified the mission. As you surely know, each year mages from across the world gather at Mystic Night. It's a festival to explore mysteries and pursue the advancement of magic. It's also an event where those eager to uncover the land's secrets gather and interfere with one another. Duke Hyber sighed softly. That's true, but I'm not really interested in those things. However, if some contaminant is introduced there, the matter becomes entirely different. Do you know where Mystic Night is held each year? Hyber asked Ludger. Ludger remained calm and answered, Kassar Basin, outside the Empire's territory. Hyber elaborated, his gaze distant. Great energy veins flow from the earth and converge there. As a result, the space is warped, forming a strange anomaly. Ludger agreed. Exactly. The entire basin has a very high mana density, creating a fog. One wrong step and someone may never return from there. He continued, the only time people can enter the Kassar Basin is 3 days each year. Mystic Night is held to explore its secrets during that brief window. He opened his palm as if offering an invisible stream of energy, and I happened to see information indicating something will occur there this year. Therefore, I want you to find those planning the incident and eliminate those contaminant elements. Ludger raised an eyebrow. The Duke's words confirmed his suspicion. Certainly he didn't need me for such a task, Ludger said with a hint of sarcasm. Duke Hyber smiled lightly. Who else could I ask? The old tower? The new tower? The disillusioned alliance? Someone like you, loyal to no side, is perfect for this job. Ludger folded his arms and fell silent. I understand why you asked me. He drew a deep breath. Still, I don't see why it has to be me. Duke Hyber's smile widened, full of confidence. Haha, you think I'd shamelessly ask you to do this for nothing? He planted a hand on the chair and looked at Ludger with a sly eye. I, Hyber Katatushan, swear by my name that I will give you a most fitting reward. Ludger glanced back, a faint wry smile. Just so you know, I won't budge an inch for mere coin. Hyber laughed heartily. My dear, you think I'd only flaunt wealth at you? He leaned forward, his voice lowering. From this old man's experience, people like you value information more than money. Hyber smiled mysteriously. As a special advance, I'll answer one question, ask me anything. Ludger narrowed his eyes, thoughtful. Information, huh? He tilted his head, growing serious. Then, do you know anything about non-elemental magic, Duke? Duke Hyber stroked his chin, pensive. Non-elemental magic, you say? I assume you're not asking about the most basic facts. In that case, this is perfect. Hearing that, Ludger grew more serious and replied, Pardon? Hyber explained, information related to non-elemental sorcery may be found at Mystic Night. Back in the present, the train was nearing its destination, on the outskirts of the Kassar Basin, the city of Palix. The train of thought brought Ludger back to his meeting with Duke Hyber that day. Have you ever heard of the manor in the Kassar Basin? Hyber asked slowly. A manor? Ludger frowned. How could anyone live in a place that opens only 3 days a year? Hyber nodded. That building existed even before the mysterious night began, 73 years ago. Research shows it's centuries old, and its owner was once an ancient mage. He continued. Most of the magical texts there are written in a lost ancient tongue. Only fragments have been deciphered, about vanished kinds of magic. With your Larsile deciphering ability, I believe you could read them. Ludger kept his tone calm. You mean among them might be books on non-elemental magic? I can hardly believe that. Hyber sighed softly, his gaze sharpening. I know a few people who once possessed that kind of magic. None lived long, but they all shared one thing. They attended the mysterious night, as if searching for something. I don't think they risked their lives for mere delusion, he asserted. They must have discovered something in the Kaiser Basin. Back in the present, Ludger walked down Basin Street, his thoughts wandering. If the Duke was correct, the place hid something special, something even his master didn't know about. But the biggest variable was Leslie's scheme. He might be the contaminant, the Duke implied. Ludger recalled Leslie's words at the Black Dawn meeting. Soon those old mages will destroy themselves without knowing why. He clenched his fist. Whether it's Leslie or anyone in my way, I will find that book and save Lynn. Wow, boss, look. Arpa cheered. Arpa pointed at a glittering carriage passing by. Transparent horses pulling the carriage. Amazing, Ludger observed and explained. They're summoned dead horses animated by magic infused into the carriage. It seems the ground holds enough mana to sustain them indefinitely, since we're close to the Kaiser Basin. They stopped before the Grand Handover Hotel. Arpa gaped. Are we really staying here? This place must be expensive. It's fine, Ludger replied. Duke Hyber is sponsoring it. They entered the hotel's luxurious lobby. Arpa exclaimed, wow, everyone here looks so wealthy. This is truly a luxury hotel. Ludger looked around. Indeed. I also see many mages here for the mysterious night. He put on the glasses taken from the royal treasury and scanned the area closely. I'm fairly certain after surveying with possibility sight. Everyone here has immense potential and mana. Arpa's eyes shone as she admired the displays. Arpa pointed to a crowd. Boss, people are gathering over there. Groups murmured and whispered. Ludger looked toward the assembled crowd. Some nearby people wondered who was drawing such a large crowd. I'm sure everyone here is famous. Ludger focused. The lens reflected each person's mana output, but one spot stood out with far greater mana. He thought to himself, even from this distance, their potential is outstanding. Who could it be? But suddenly a gaze made Ludger freeze. Ludger said hastily, Arpa, we already have the room key. Let's head up. Arpa, puzzled, huh? Why are you suddenly in such a hurry, boss? Ludger explained his urgency. Because the person over there is actually an acquaintance. He stepped back, staring at the crowd. She seems intent on not letting me go. So if she sees me walking around here alive, what will happen? The mentioned girl had white hair, wore formal attire, and stood regally in the crowd. She was Ekaterina Volsvaya, Queen of Lutar. VIP corridor. 30 minutes later. Laughter echoed down the hall. Oh ho 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 ho, Queen Ekaterina laughed loudly. Do you hear the praises the people give me? Just hearing them makes me feel marvelous. A male attendant hurriedly chided, Your Majesty, please maintain your dignity. While a female attendant disagreed, Your Majesty's laughter is so beautiful and charming. Your Majesty. Chamberlain Vitali flustered. What are you saying? She may be the queen, but she must maintain her dignity. If anyone sees her true nature, it will be a disgrace for the nation. Chamberlain Valentina retorted. A disgrace to the nation. The queen is a role model in her own way. If it were me, I'd let people see her true nature. Queen Ekaterina completely ignored them and strode onto the balcony. All right, this is a long-awaited break, so set aside tedious duties and let us relieve our tiredness. Vitali trailed after her in despair. Your Majesty, we are not here to relax. Do not forget we are here to build relations with the mages at the mysterious night. He reminded her further. This time my brother is right. You are now the queen leading our nation, so you occupy a position where you must do things even when you do not want to. Ekaterina turned back with a sly smile. Like what Machiavelli said, Vitali replied respectfully. Yes, it seems you still remember him. Ekaterina responded nonchalantly. How could I forget him? He was just a mercenary, but he dedicated himself to our kingdom. I recall all the scolding he gave me. She continued walking down the corridor. How tragic. Who would have known he'd die like that in the final battle when victory was within reach? I still have much to learn from him even now if he were alive. Ludger and Arpa reached their room. Ludger sighed. Phew, her personality hasn't changed. Arpa, surprised. Is she really like that? When I glimpsed her in the lobby, she seemed so distant. Ludger gave a faint smile. In the past, she didn't even pretend to be dignified. She was foolish and clumsy to the point that I couldn't imagine her becoming a nation's leader even after 1,000,000 years. Arpa asked. Strange. I'm surprised you stood by her and fought with her. Was your enemy back then even more troublesome? Ludger answered. My enemy? Well, Prince Alexei looks like a much more capable leader from the outside. But in truth, he's cruel. If he deems it necessary, He won't hesitate to kill innocent citizens. He caused much harm through forced labor and arbitrary executions. Ludger leaned back on the sofa. On the other hand, Ekaterina may seem arrogant from afar, but she cares deeply for others. She also has a strange talent for gathering outstanding people. Once, a photo of her waving the kingdom's banner while fighting on the front lines even made the papers. That immediately won domestic support and shifted the course of the war. Arpa smiled. So her victory must have been good for the people of that kingdom. Ludger responded with a pensive look. He recalled that memory. It was a snowy night. Footsteps approached and asked, "You're him, aren't you? Machiavelli, the mercenary." Ludger at that time was the cloaked mercenary Machiavelli sitting by the campfire. The flames flared and occasionally crackled. A younger Ekaterina, dressed warmly, smiled brilliantly as she stepped forward and confidently introduced herself. "My name is Ekaterina Volsvaya. Some call me the Princess of Tyranny and Extravagance." Ekaterina, smiling brightly, declared, "But I'm being pursued right now, so I need your help." He thought for a moment and then replied, "So how much will you pay me? I'll decide whether to accept your offer once I know the sum." Ekaterina, still smiling, answered frankly, "Unfortunately, I don't have a penny right now because I'm being pursued." Ludger looked at her, incredulous. How shameless. She wants to hire a mercenary without paying him. Doesn't she think I might sell her to the prince instead of helping? Ekaterina smiled. "Haha, well, if you did that, then my judgment of your character would be wrong." Ludger, surprised. "What?" Ekaterina leaned back laughing, full of confidence. "But I will not regret it, because it's the choice I've made. If things go badly, I will take responsibility. But it would be terrible if I failed, so I must do my best." Ludger was silent for a moment, then offered a piece of advice. "You'd better learn to be a leader before you become queen." The flames flared in the night as the conversation continued. Ekaterina, What do you mean?" Ludger, "It means I accept your offer, because I'm curious to see what kind of nation you'll create." Back in the present, in the hotel room, after a reflective pause, he replied, "Yeah, Ekaterina really was the flame that cold land needed." Arpa asked, still puzzled by the earlier exchange. "Huh? How can a person be a flame?" Ludger crossed his arms helplessly and explained, "It's a metaphor." The next morning at the Caesar Basin, a swirl of light and energy swept through the air. The mysterious night officially opened. Massive clouds rolled and coiled into vortices, forming a deep, narrow passage beneath. From the center, a powerful gust blew outward. A mage exclaimed, "Ah, the wind is so strong." A hat-wearing gentleman called out, "Oh, this is when the entrance opens." Another urged, "No time to stand and stare, let's go. We only have 3 days, so stay sharp." Ludger and Arpa stood nearby. Arpa wondered what caused the phenomenon. Ludger explained, "They say it happens when excess mana streams collide at a point and cancel each other out. The location of the phenomenon is essentially a mana vacuum, so a void appears there and creates an entrance." Arpa gasped, "Oh, I get it. How fascinating." Ludger said, "Now, shall we go inside?" Arpa, "Yes." Inside the Caesar Basin, an outpost of tents was set up beneath an aurora-streaked night sky. A man shouted, "All right, move it." Ludger and Arpa stepped among the tents. Ludger said, "We're here. This must be our tent." They entered the tent, which was furnished like a luxurious hotel room, complete with a fireplace. Ludger looked around, surprised. "Wow. It's roomier than I expected, and seems to have everything we might need." It seemed he'd secured the most expensive tent. Arpa turned to Ludger. "Boss, I'll take a walk and get familiar with the area." Ludger replied, "Sure. Leave your luggage here." He set the luggage on a chair and began to arrange things. "Okay, I should tidy our belongings first." Suddenly he heard footsteps entering. He startled and turned around. He saw a little blonde girl hiding behind a wardrobe, peering out at him with curiosity. He thought to himself, "A little girl?" Ludger smiled gently and sat down to talk. "Are you lost, little one? Where are your parents?" The girl looked at Ludger, trembling slightly. "I'm looking for them." Ludger, "You're looking? Looking for what?" At that moment, Arpa returned holding a small book and a map. Arpa, eager, "Boss, I brought back a small book and the outpost map." Ludger, turning to Arpa, "Glad you're back, Arpa." Arpa ran over. Ludger, continuing, "I think this child is separated from her parents. Can you help me find them?" Arpa, confused, "Which child?" Ludger pointed to where the girl had been standing, but no one was there. Arpa, surprised, "There's nobody here." Ludger turned back to look at the corner of the cupboard, but strangely, No one was there. His eyes showed surprise. He wondered, she left. But how? Could this be related to the strange phenomenon of Kesar Basin? Arpa looked worried. Boss? Ludger rubbed his forehead. Never mind. I must have been mistaken. He turned to Arpa and asked, by the way, what about the tasks I told you to do before we came? Arpa seemed to recall something and replied, ah, you meant to look for the purported first-rank mage, Leslie, right? He continued, I checked the middle-aged male mages as you ordered, but over 200 match that description, so it's hard to narrow it down without more information. Ludger answered, I understand. Just then, a loud shout came from outside. The expedition to the mysterious manor is about to depart. Anyone wishing to join, go now. Ludger and Arpa stepped out to find people gathered around a campfire. Everyone was murmuring. Arpa asked, that mysterious manor must be the mystic manor in Kesar Basin, right? Ludger replied, yes. It seems quite far from the outpost. Arpa asked Ludger, but is there any reason we're all gathering to go together? Ludger explained, those who came earlier to scout have been searching alone, but they all disappeared. Ludger scanned the crowd and asked Arpa, Arpa, do you see any mage here worth watching closely? Arpa's eyes lit up. Wait a moment. I'll compare the people here with the mage list Hans gave me. Arpa's gaze settled on two men. The white-haired man is Amar Chuvaka. He's from the southern forest and uses a blend of magic and dark arts. The middle-aged man is Derek Olson. He has no affiliations and is a top 5th circle mage. Arpa pointed out other notable mages. The old man with the gilded staff is Mage Limray. He leads an independent school and is a Lexar mage. The muscular middle-aged man is Belkart Benmark. He's a military mage from the kingdom of Delica and a master of electro-magic. Arpa's eyes shifted to a cloaked man sitting hidden beneath a nearby tree, and that's Sempus. Despite his appearance, he's said to be a fearsome berserker. He isn't a very high-circle mage, but his superb magic control has let him defeat higher-ranked mages. Then he looked directly at the pink-haired woman walking toward them, and the woman approaching is Loina Pavlini. She's a 6th Circle Illusion Alliance mage, of the Lexar class, skilled in magic analysis and research. Ludger, surprised, said, wait, who did you say? Loina approached with a bright expression. Oh, Professor Ludger Cherish. I didn't expect to meet you here. Long time no see. Loina stepped closer. Are you joining this expedition? Do you mind if I come along? Ludger replied, yes, I'm joining. But aren't you traveling with the others from the Shattered Illusion Alliance? Loina bowed her head. I am, but they were forced into the group, and we aren't really close, so being with them is frustrating. Ludger responded coldly, we aren't very close either. Loina immediately looked up, astonished and a little hurt. What? We're not close? But you saved me and the students that day in the capital. Ludger tried to explain, well, I saved you, but that doesn't mean we're close. Arpa, standing beside them, suddenly exclaimed excitedly as if inspired, aha, so if you save someone, you become close to them. Ludger gave the boy a weary look. Forget it, Arpa. I'll explain later. Ludger turned to Loina. I don't mind traveling together, but please ask your teammates for permission first. Loina nodded cheerfully. Oh, certainly. Don't worry about that. Besides, I need to fetch my luggage anyway. After happily fetching her luggage, Loina returned and looked at Ludger. So, we're close now, right? Ludger remained silent, saying nothing. The group set off along a forest trail. Ludger asked, are we taking this forest path to the manor? Loina answered, yes. People have used and maintained this route for a long time, and it has a relatively low rate of magic-related disasters. Ludger wondered, but won't we be more vulnerable to monsters adapted to this environment? Why don't we go across the plains instead? Loina replied, there have been risky attempts to cross the plains. The three of them walked with the group. She recounted a terrifying event. The moment those dozens of 4th Circle mages stepped from the outpost into the plains, they vanished entirely, and the next morning, right where they disappeared, there was a heap of bones matching the number of missing people. Moreover, the bones showed signs that many years had passed. After finishing the story, Loina's body trembled with fear, but she continued, that happened exactly 5 years before my first visit here. Facing that kind of danger is far better than facing monsters. Ludger glanced at her to calm her. I understand. While walking, Ludger suddenly frowned. His eyes narrowed as he glanced off in another direction. He turned his head toward the spot that looked odd. Loina also scanned around to see what was happening and asked, what's wrong? He remained silent, staring at that place for a moment before answering. Nothing. I think I overreacted. This place is too dangerous. Far off in the direction Ludger had been looking, a large stag with magnificent antlers stood on a hilltop, the wind whistling around it. The journey continued until they reached their destination, the mysterious manor. The luxurious estate was wrapped in thick mist, its massive gates shut tight. Standing before the grand manor, Ludger asked, "Can this many people really get inside?" Loina replied, "Oh yes, there's no hard limit on how many can be admitted." Loina explained, "That said, 300 people can't move together. If we don't travel in groups of 5 to 20, we'll get lost inside." She turned to Ludger and Arpa with determination. "There are 3 of us, so we need at least 2 more." At that moment, a voice called from behind, "Sorry, I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose, but you're looking for members to join your group, right?" A cloaked man stepped forward and said, "May I have a spot?" The man was none other than Sempus. Ludger looked at Sempus and asked, "Why do you want to join our group, of all the groups?" Sempus answered, "Other mages think I might cause trouble and won't accept me. Besides, I don't see any other group needing extra members." He elaborated on his intent. "I don't mean to cause trouble, so don't worry. I came with a goal in mind. Lately I've felt I've hit a limit, and I hope to find a way to break through." Ludger pondered for a moment, then reluctantly said, "I'm not keen on you joining, but we're not in a position to be picky. You can come with us." Arpa reminded him, "Professor." At that instant, an authoritative voice boomed with a loud sound. "Why don't you leave that last spot for me?" He was surprised to recognize the older man with a staff as Limray, the wise. A short while later, before the manor, Ludger's group, now 5 members, Ludger, Arpa, Loina, Sempus, and Limray, entered together. The group passed through the manor's great gate. Ludger glanced outside. "We're not far from the main gate, but you can't see through, as if we're separated from the outside world." After everyone passed, the gate slowly closed. The entire path was shrouded in thick fog. Limray looked at Ludger with puzzlement. "This can't be your first time here. Why are you so surprised?" Ludger replied, "It's my first time." Limray grew more irritated. "What? Why have you never been here before?" Ludger calmly said, "I was busy with other matters." Limray snorted, I don't like your attitude." Arpa stepped forward to intervene. "Don't be mad at him, sir." Limray laughed heartily. "Ha ha ha, very well. If my little Arpa says so, then this old man must obey." Ludger was stunned, thinking, "What? Since when is he my little Arpa?" Ludger leaned toward Loina and whispered, "Loina, is he really a sage?" "He doesn't seem trustworthy enough to be one," Loina replied. "He's a bit eccentric. In the past, he was wise enough to be called a sage, but some say he changed after delving too deeply into magic." Limray cleared his throat. "Ahem. Now then, I'll do you a favor. As a senior, I'll lead instead of someone who's never been here." His steel staff clicked against the floor with each step. Limray took the lead and explained as they entered, "The manor's interior layout shifts cyclically. There are times when you simply can't reach your destination, so you must decide exactly where you're headed in advance." He walked steadily, smiling like a guide. The group followed up the stairs as he continued, "And I'm sure you've at least heard there are rules you must follow inside this manor. Consider that our minimal duty as uninvited guests. As long as we obey the rules, we won't have any problems." When they reached the main hall, Limray again went ahead. Ludger asked, "Anyway, isn't everyone here heading for the library?" Limray muttered, such arrogance from a first-timer." Limray led them down a corridor. "Let me explain the rules I mentioned. In corridors like these, you are not allowed to stop moving for more than a certain period." Ludger asked, "How much movement is required?" Limray answered, "Just a small motion is enough, but if you don't move for 5 minutes, you'll vanish without a trace. Also, each room has its own rules, which I can explain later. The most important thing is we must leave the manor before midnight." Arpa asked, "What happens if we don't leave by then?" Limray turned back to warn, "Terrifying monsters appear after midnight. Horrible beasts that can devour you in one bite." "Arpa," Ludger interjected, "I doubt you're joking in a place like this." "Are you serious?" The staff's knocks on the floor echoed with his footsteps down the corridor, as Limray confirmed, "Yes, a survivor from long ago saw those monsters." Ludger considered this and remarked, "So we must follow the rules or vanish, and there are monsters too? How dreadful." Suddenly, Loina screamed in terror. "Ah!" She recoiled in fright. Ludger turned and asked, "What's wrong?" Loina trembled and pointed ahead. "Oh, over there. The corpses." The group saw a horrifying sight. Blood, soaked bodies scattered across the corridor floor. Ludger observed and asked, "Is this related to the manor's mysterious phenomena?" Sempus examined the bodies and analyzed. "Those phenomena don't leave corpses. This is clearly murder, and since the blood hasn't darkened, it happened recently." Sempus stepped closer to the bodies. "There are 10 corpses, so the attackers must have been numerous. Yet there's almost no sign of physical struggle. It's as if they were attacked simultaneously by someone, and the assailant was someone they trusted." Ludger turned to ask Limray, "If your judgment is correct, it was likely a team of about 20. Any thoughts on that, Limray?" Limray replied, "What? You think I care who's on which team?" Limray bent over a decapitated corpse and said, "But I know who this is. Do you see this silver necklace around his neck? It's an identification tag worn by Delica's military mages. This is certainly Belkart Benmar." Loina was stunned. "I can't believe someone so famous could die like this." Limray continued inspecting the body and explained, "Why are you surprised? Even a 6th Circle mage can die unjustly in a raid. That's the reality." At that moment, a strange phenomenon occurred. The corpse suddenly vanished, and Loina screamed in horror. "Ah! The bodies are disappearing." The blood-soaked corpses they had just seen began to dissolve into the air, leaving only faint streaks of light. Ludger and Sempus stared in surprise at the last traces of the bodies. Sempus said to Ludger with concern, "You must keep moving through the corridors. The corpses vanish because they couldn't move." Ludger pondered for a moment. "I wondered why they killed those people right after entering the manor, but I get it now. This is what the attackers wanted." Loina panicked. "We must hurry and tell the others there are murderers in this manor." Ludger replied coldly, "We can't. The evidence is gone now. No one will believe us. They'll just assume those people broke some rule here." Sempus said calmly, "Exactly. If we raise the alarm, we might provoke the killers and become their next targets." He added, "I don't care about avoiding them, but I suspect you all feel the same as I do." Ludger confirmed, "Right. I believe ignoring it and moving on is best." Loina trembled. "How can we do that?" Ludger turned and made a decision. "Let's go. Staying here will only make things harder." At that moment he sensed something amiss. His eyes narrowed. Ludger stepped forward and asked, "What is this painting? It wasn't here a moment ago." Limray suddenly looked up at a picture on the wall and replied, "A painting? Ah. So you can see that translucent frame. It's one of the manor's phenomena. Only certain people can see it." Ludger turned back to Loina, skeptically asking, "Am I the only one who can see this?" Loina nodded in confirmation. Limray continued to lead them on and added, "There's a portrait in the frame, right? They say whoever appears in it will die soon." Ludger, surprised, asked, "They'll die?" Ludger kept his eyes on the painting. Limray went on, "I'm not sure about the details, but where there's smoke there's fire. I believe those rumors are true." Ludger stepped closer and looked directly at it. Within the frame, a clear portrait of Limray appeared. Ludger took a step back, his gaze unflinching. "I understand." The group continued their journey through the mysterious manor. In the manor's winding corridor, they checked each room in turn. Ludger asked, "Arpa, how many rooms have we checked?" Arpa replied, "The room we just left was number 17. The boy exclaimed, "Oh!" The corridor's layout changed again. The space seemed alive, twisting by some invisible will. They moved cautiously through the ever-shifting hallway. Ludger asked curiously, "The corridors keep changing, and every room has its own rules. Quite troublesome. How does Lord Limray know all these laws?" Limray walked on calmly and replied matter-of-factly, "How do you think a person's wit doesn't sharpen over time and naturally learn such things?" Standing before the next door, Limray smiled faintly and turned the knob. "If little Arpa is right, this should be room 18. He sighed with a touch of mockery. "Every time I come here, I get tired of having to find rooms by chance." When the door opened, Limray cried out excitedly, "Here it is!" They entered a vast hall, a red carpet running down the aisle and long rows of bookshelves neatly arranged. Limray exclaimed with joy, "We finally found the library." Ludger stared in awe at the overwhelming sight. "There are more books here than I imagined." Ludger turned to Limray and asked, "Does this library have any rules?" Limray looked around and replied, "None, except you must not take anything out. But that rule actually applies to the entire manor." Limray ordered, "All right, split up and search for what you need. I'll tell everyone when it's time to leave." Loina answered, "Understood, see you later." Ludger and Arpa stepped into the stacks. He paused by an old shelf and brushed his hand through a thick layer of dust. He opened a book and realized all the volumes were written in an ancient tongue. Deciphering them won't be hard, but you can't grasp the contents without reading them all. 3 days probably not enough to study non-prime magic. Ludger noticed a book with a red cover. Huh? This one? He opened it and began to read. Inside it said, "The Lumines Order long hunted demons and fought them. But their motive was not justice, it was to protect their own power." Ludger realized, this book is about the Lumines Order. The most famous battle was between Saint Arcanus and his hundreds of holy knights against the high demon Serna. In the battle, both Serna and the saint were killed. With their leaders gone, the demons retreated and hid across the world. After the fall of the chief demon, Lumines grew proud and tyrannical, even meddling in other nations' affairs. Yet no one dared oppose them, for Lumines had been granted terrible power to control minds. Eventually, we obtained a precious artifact to restore our freedom, but there was still much to prepare. So we allied with the goblins and secretly began planting a world tree underground. Ludger was silent. So this author was the one who planted the world tree underground. No name is given, so their identity is uncertain. But by the timeline, they later succeeded in sealing Basara and were discovered by the cult. He frowned. Strange. Why do they call Serna the demon's linchpin? Demons usually fight among themselves. A fleeting thought. Could the chronicle be wrong? Or did Basara lie? Survivors of Lumenis's purge were lucky to escape, but they were relentlessly pursued. The only choice left was to enter the taboo lands, from which no one had ever returned. However, my comrades were swept into disaster in that land and died. As hope dwindled, we discovered a manor and headed there. There we met the manor's master. More precisely, it was the remaining consciousness of a dead man. The master welcomed us, and with nowhere else to run, we chose to stay. They used the manor's mysterious power to create rules and defenses against a Lumines assault. We drew seals, raised a barrier, and took measures to keep people from easily entering the archive library. Ludger turned the page, studying the entries. So this is how this strange manor came to be. Interesting, but not the information I was looking for. But before he stopped, a crucial revelation froze him. The book read, "Preparations are complete, yet the things we could not bring here still weigh on my mind. We divided our most sacred relic into 7 pieces. Every one of my people took a piece and scattered them across the world. But were they well hidden? I also worry about the piece the goblins took. For their military losses, fighting demons were surely severe." The author left a final message. "If one day someone walking our path reads this, there is one thing I want you to know. Know that our fight for freedom continues, and it is strong." Ludger closed the book, his hand clenched around it. 7 pieces, shattered and scattered, and a means to gain freedom. These must be the relics I seek. He wondered whether coincidence or fate had led him to this volume. He returned the book to its place, thoughts racing. I found a clue about the relics I never expected. This is a great discovery. He scanned the library. But where are the books on non-prime magic that I came for? Suddenly Ludger's eye caught a spine. Wait, this book looks different from the others. Could it be? He reached out and pulled it free. At that moment, the adjacent shelf slid aside, revealing a hidden room. Arpa ran over in amazement. "Boss, you found a secret room." He turned to Arpa. "Sorry, Arpa. Can you distract anyone nearby and buy me some time?" Arpa, sensing something odd, asked, "Is this a secret from the others? Can you tell me why?" Ludger answered, eyes cold. "I can't be sure none of them are enemies. That's why I want to keep this quiet for now." Arpa understood. "Got it. Okay." Ludger turned, ready to step into the space just revealed behind the shelf. This space was hidden, so there must be something valuable here. The room was old, filled with books, and had a desk nearby. Behind it sat a dead man reduced to a dried skeleton. Ludger approached the worn desk, where a lamp and a leather-bound notebook lay. He read the notebook on the desk. This book is the record of the man who inherited the manor. It holds the manor's mysteries, its magical traps, and their functions. He then bent down and pulled out a drawer, continuing to search for more clues or important documents. He opened the notebook. Ludger read, "Being chosen was neither blessing nor favor. It was a curse that destroys the body and prevents passing 30. I leave this knowledge to those who take the curse. I hope it helps you." He flinched. He had finally found it. At that moment, Limray's loud call came from outside. "Little Arpa, it's time to leave. Hurry up." Arpa replied, "Okay, I'm coming." Ludger muttered, "Damn, time's up already?" He put the notebook back in the drawer. Due to the manor's rules, Ludger could not take the book out. He decided to return the next day to continue his research. As he left the room, Ludger noticed mysterious footprints on the floor prints that seemed to have been made recently. Ludger murmured, "On the other hand, this manor is over 500 years old yet looks new, so the prints could very well remain fresh." Ludger stepped through the doorway. The door opened and shut as he left the secret room. Echo was on. Ludger asked Limray, "Do you know the way out?" Limray replied as they walked, "Finding specific rooms is hard, but the exit is not." Ludger followed behind. When they reached the second-floor corridor overlooking the main hall, Ludger asked Limray, "I see. Did you find what you were looking for?" Limray muttered, Wonderful if it were, but no." Then at that moment a group gathered in the main hall began to argue, and whispers spread everywhere. A man shouted, "Don't you know you're not allowed to gather more than 20 people? Do you want us all to die?" A woman retorted, "Then go. Do you think we want to stand here? I'm telling you, the manor doors are locked, so we can't get out." Ludger's group was taken aback by this news. 5 of them stayed on the second-floor corridor watching below. The arguing continued. Someone yelled, "Then try breaking the door." Another shot back, "Do you think we haven't tried? We even tried magic, but it didn't work." Limray stared at the scene in the hall and said, "The door is locked? That has never happened before." Sempus tried to connect the dots and whispered, "First the murder, and now the door suddenly locks though it never has. Could this really be a coincidence?" Loina flinched and asked tremblingly, "Do you think the killers are behind this too?" Ludger pondered, "Nothing else fits right now." He frowned. "But that means the culprits know this manor extremely well. So how?" He recalled the mysterious footprints and the book left in the hidden room. Surely, they had been there before him and learned how to control the manor. He looked down at the noisy crowd. Chaos in the main hall was escalating. Shouts pierced the air, some wanted to flee, others to band together. A man below noticed a group climbing the stairs. One of them, wearing a hat, turned back arrogantly. "What? Why should we cooperate with ordinary people like you?" "Enough. We'll find another way." The black-haired man below, furious, shouted, "Ordinary? You may be our seniors, but that's no excuse to speak like that." Ludger turned to Loina and asked, "Who are they?" She watched them for a moment and answered, "They're from the Academy of Truth, brilliant mages, but notoriously proud and stubborn." The group then reached the second-floor corridor and met Ludger's party. The older man leading them laughed and exclaimed, "Oh my, who is this?" "Limray, you're here again this year. How did you get in without our help? As I've said, your efforts are pointless." He continued to taunt. "Still wandering around here with false hopes?" Limray glared angrily for a moment before replying, "Mind your business and go, Torte." Torte, the blond man with a long beard, turned away, his face full of disdain, and left. The group went off in another direction. Ludger asked Limray, "Do you know the members of the Academy of Truth?" Limray watched them go and replied, "Yes. I used to be part of them, though not an official member, only an outside advisor helping them." He turned, sadness on his face, and recounted, "My only daughter was assigned an important mission by the Academy of Truth. She was a rising star among them, and studied arcane magic more devotedly than anyone." Loina, curious, asked, "Has she?" She fell silent as he continued, "Decades ago, my daughter came here as a member of the Academy of Truth." Limray continued his daughter's story. "I only heard it from her, but after everything ended and they were heading home, an excessive mana concentration spawned a mana storm that struck them. His daughter tried to rally everyone to withstand the storm, believing the mana surge would be brief and would subside if they held out a while. Pain showed on his face as he said, I believed her judgment was right. With many skilled people together, they could have resisted if they had cooperated, but some panicked and fled, and others followed, toppling the balance. In the end, the power balance collapsed, and 152 people who stayed to hold back the storm disappeared. He glared at those who had left and spat. Those people have been cowards since then. Now they shamelessly prance about as if they're more important and should live longer. Loina and Arpa looked stunned. Loina gripped her hand in disbelief. How could they? Arpa inferred. So that's why you're here. Limray sighed. Yes. Because I couldn't let go, as a failed father. I still believe my daughter may yet be alive despite being caught in that phenomenon. He turned to Ludger and said, I've talked too long. We don't have time for this. You think the murderers caused it, don't you? Ludger replied solemnly. Yes. It's the most plausible scenario right now. Limray continued. Then we can conclude they somehow learned to control this manner, and they possess the means to do it, don't you think? Ludger agreed, his gaze hardening. Exactly. Our top priority is to find how they control this place. They can't do it from outside, so they must still be inside the manor. Senpa's interjected. If they can control it, we should be able to too. So they're surely guarding it closely, unless they're fools. Only a few of them would remain inside to do it. They all moved off. Loina followed and asked, what's their motive in doing all this? Ludger kept a calm face as he led the way. We'll find out when we catch them. There's only 4 hours until midnight, so hurry. Loina hesitated. Should we tell the others about this? He glanced at the whispering crowd below and said, it would do no good and only increase the chaos. We can't let ourselves be delayed by useless suspicion. Ludger trusted his judgment. I'm sure they're still inside. The book I found says the manor's mechanisms can be controlled from within. The key now is how we can quickly locate the control device. Limray suddenly seemed to realize something, produced an object and said, oh, but first, I expect things may turn dangerous, so please accept this heirloom of mine. Ludger, surprised, asked, what? Why are you giving this to me? The cloaked man smiled. Ah, I just thought you'd be safer with it than I am. You'll thank me for it when you have to face someone as strong as I am. Ha ha. He held out a necklace set with a gleaming green gem. Ludger accepted the gift with a solemn nod. All right, thank you. After an hour of searching, the group was still roaming the halls, checking every room. Limray snapped, damn it, not this one. Loina called from behind, is checking each room really our best option? If there was a clue in one of them, someone would have found it already. Limray replied, true, but what else can we do? This is our only lead right now. Senpa's tried to reason, recalling the scene. Since everyone was focused on the library, people would likely pay less attention to the other rooms. Ludger pondered who could pull off such a scheme. The only person I can think of capable of something this big is Leslie, and the motive would likely be to have the witches eliminate one another. But he felt something was missing. Yet this plot wouldn't even have the participants. There has to be something else. Suddenly, the corridor shuddered violently, and everyone struggled to keep their balance. Loina turned to Ludger in alarm. What was that terrible shake? She worried. It's not collapsing, is it? A shriek rose from behind, making the whole group whirl around. A man came running toward them in a panic, shouting, save me. A monster is after me. Behind him, soldiers wrapped in purple magic, clad head to toe in steel armor and wielding long spears, gave chase. Ludger, slightly stunned, said, aren't those the monsters that only appear after midnight? He exclaimed, it's still a long time until midnight. Then he ordered, deal with those creatures first. Loina stepped forward quickly, warning the fleeing man, hurry and take cover behind us. She swung her wand. A magic circle flared as she chanted, fifth circle, pillar of the Sunday. The man dove behind Loina just in time as a burst of blazing magical fire shot from her wand toward the pursuing soldiers. The floor where the creatures had chased the man scorched into a black puddle of char. The man showered them with grateful thanks. Ludger turned to the man who had escaped and asked, hey, what happened to you? Where is the rest of your group? The man, gasping, replied, can't you see I ran alone? After the mansion shook, those monsters appeared and killed them all. From the scorched hallway, smoke billowed thickly. In the center, a swirl of purple magic reformed. Someone warned Ludger, careful behind you. Ludger glanced at the monsters as they regenerated after Loina's strike. They're regenerating. What are these things? Limray answered. Rumor says they're the mansion's defense system. Normally they appear only after midnight, but whoever locked the doors must have forced them awake. Senpa's voiced his suspicion. That tremor was probably them activating the defenses. I doubt we can destroy them by normal means. Should we retreat? Ludger stared at the creatures. If we run, they might reach the first floor hall, so we have to stop them here. He turned to Limray. Please evacuate with the others, Limray. Hearing that, Limray flinched. What? How can you say that? Didn't you forget you always need at least 5 people? Ludger looked down at the panting man sitting on the floor with a terrified face and answered, but this man ran all the way here alone. I don't know why, but the mansion's rules aren't in effect right now. He calmly closed his eyes, reached into his coat, pulled something out, and told the others, the situation is dangerous, so I won't ask for help. We can handle this ourselves, don't worry about us. Evacuate. Arpa raised his hand, ready to fight. Senpa said firmly, I refuse. He stepped forward. It would bruise my pride to run after we've come this far. Loina objected angrily. I'll fight too. I can't abandon my friends. She brandished her wand and crouched into a fighting stance. Limray led the man away, then turned back to the group preparing to face the monsters and sneered. You're risking your lives over something so trivial? Ridiculous. He withdrew. Very well, we'll leave the rest to you. Be careful and good luck. Sempa stepped forward and challenged the monsters. Come on, I'll take you down in one blow. Arpa leapt up to attack as well. The ranks of shield and spear soldiers surged forward to attack Ludger's group. From Sempas's hand, mana coalesced into bolts of lightning that shot out as Arpa charged ahead. He kicked one creature so hard its head flew off like a ball. Loina watched in astonishment. That kid is really strong. Ludger replied, You haven't seen anything yet. Ludger thrust his staff forward and shouted, Back off. Arpa. A streak of flame shot from his staff, cutting through the air toward the soldier creatures. Arpa easily leaped aside to dodge. The creatures burned and gradually dissipated. Everyone cheered. Look. It was hit midair, so it's dissolving and can't regenerate. Ludger stared at the blackened mana pool left where the creatures had been incinerated. I followed what I read in that book, and it really was the answer, he thought. He quickly looked at his teammates and said decisively, They regenerate by drawing mana directly from the mansion's floor. Strike them when they're no longer touching the ground and attack. Sempa seemed to grasp the pattern. He extended his hand as blue mana flared around him, forming a thin protective layer, and murmured, Perfect. Wasting no time, Sempas dove into the enemy ranks as his lightning sparks flashed. They struck each soldier directly, cracking their armor. From the rear, Ludger watched and shouted, Hurry, Arpa. Arpa moved like an arrow through the wind, his rapid punches sending them flying. The purple-black magic began to unravel. He landed lightly, without a steady mana supply from the floor. The soldiers gradually dissipated in midair. Loina, witnessing it, exclaimed in amazement, Whoa, I thought he killed them. Ludger replied calmly, Well done. But it wasn't that simple. Loina stared in disbelief as pieces of armor clashed and fell, stepping back in confusion. How is that possible? They just keep regenerating. Despite their persistence, the creatures rematerialized into fresh ranks. Ludger fixed his cold gaze on the advancing monsters, gripping his staff. If they want to wipe us out, the most effective way is to appear from behind or closer to us. But they're coming from the same direction as before. Loina tilted her head at Ludger's reasoning, blinked, then realized. Oh, you mean the monsters have fixed respawn points? Ludger nodded, calm-faced, but eyes alight. Exactly. If we head toward where they appear, we'll reach the system we're looking for. Sempas interjected, voice a mix of weariness and resolve. Better to try once than stand frozen here, though I'm not sure I have the energy left. Hearing that, Loina snapped back into fighting spirit. Purple mana swirled around her, her pink hair lifting as she stepped forward. Then, it's my turn. Loina's eyes flashed violet as mana surged. She knew it was time for a decisive strike. Now that we know they're sustained by a mana flow beneath the floor, we just have to keep them aloft and drain their mana. Loina unleashed a powerful purple blast that enveloped an advancing steel soldier, twisting and melting its armor under the pressure. She poured all her strength into a massive mana field that encompassed several creatures at once. She lifted them into the air to sever their contact with the floor and said, Now that we know they're sustained by a mana current under the floor, all we have to do is keep them airborne and suck out their mana. At that brink, Whiner, a large pale pink creature resembling a giant slug, answered Loina's call, coiling around her like living armor and ready to charge. It declared, I'll try to take out most of them myself. Loina, standing ahead, cheered, Go, Whiner. Wow, that's an odd name, Arpa remarked, surprised and amused, but its power feels familiar. Loina, who had named Whiner, blushed with embarrassment. Ludger standing behind, sighed wearily, Arpa. 30 minutes later, in a vast room of gloomy architecture, a brilliant purple magic circle burned fiercely on the floor. At its center sat a large violet crystal radiating chaotic mana. Around the circle stood 3 newly formed monster soldiers, massive and sheathed in gleaming black steel armor, shrouded in dark purple aura with blank, menacing expressions. Several hooded figures, likely those who activated the defenses, watched nearby. One of them said, Everything's going smoothly. Examining the 3 soldiers more closely, they were tall and imposing, their bodies encased in mysterious black armor that reflected the purple glow of the magic circle. Through the helmet slits, their eyes were only 2 cold purple lights, radiating death and invulnerability. At this rate, our plan will succeed perfectly, A hooded man near the pillar whispered, his deep voice echoing in the room as he raised his hand, preparing to complete the final ritual. Suddenly a loud noise shook the chamber. The large gate behind the wizard burst open in a blinding light. The wizard spun around in shock, exclaiming, "What is this?" Through the light and drifting smoke, Ludger's group appeared. "To be honest, I'm not entirely sure how, but you're actually here," Ludger said, voice cold and decisive. He stepped forward with his staff, Loina trailing with Weiner coiled around her, and Sempus and Arpa at his side. Sempus quickly scanned the room and focused on the center. "Clearly, we just need to destroy that crystal." The dark wizard, realizing defeat, stammered in panic. "How did they get in here?" "Quick, stop them," he ordered, but the elite monster soldiers were already prepared. Ludger wasted no time. He and Sempus acted at once. Sempus thrust his hand forward as fierce blue electricity gathered in his palm. Ludger raised his staff, a complex orange-gold magic circle forming before him. A concentrated surge of mana became a devastating strike. Lightning and magical fire converged and slammed into the glowing violet crystal at the center. A blinding, violent explosion engulfed the chamber. The crystal shattered into thousands of brilliant purple fragments, sending a mana shockwave that made the hooded figures scream in agony and collapse. The large magic circle beneath the floor went dark, though the ground still trembled slightly. The group approached the scene. Loina stared and asked, "We destroyed the crystal, so it's over, right?" But Ludger felt uneasy. He scanned the area, his sharp blue eyes narrowing. "It feels like this ended too easily," he thought. "I hope I'm wrong." While everyone stayed on guard, Arpa stepped forward and felt something sticky underfoot. "Ugh, what's this slimy stuff?" He recoiled, his foot stuck in a pool of pinkish-purple liquid on the floor. Loina looked down and explained, "Oh, that's liquefied mana." Loina touched Weiner. Weiner reached its mana limit, so the excess was expelled. Weiner twitched and writhed as if shedding a burden. Loina smiled. "The expelled mana is basically a fresh mana potion." Making use of this, Loina scooped the pinkish liquid into a small cup and offered it to Ludger. "You must have used a lot of mana, drink this and recover." A few drops spilled from the rim. Ludger declined politely but firmly. "No thanks. I'm fine." Loina tried to persuade him to drink the liquid mana. "Please, just a sip." At that moment, a razor-sharp surge of energy, like a blade, streaked across and struck her back. "Loina!" Ludger shouted. He reacted quickly, catching her as the mana bolt passed. She collapsed to the floor. The group snapped into alert. "Damn it, there's still an enemy?" Ludger ground his teeth. Before they could recover, another blow like a falling hammer hit. Sempus was blasted away. The impact shook the entire floor. The attacker struck with such sudden force that no one had time to respond. Regaining his composure, Ludger pulled the stunned Arpa behind him, shielding the boy. "Right behind me. Arpa," he said. "Okay." The attacker, a tall dark figure wielding a staff, strode into the room as if emerging from mist. "Don't worry," a deep authoritative voice said. "I have no intention of harming that child." He stepped closer, his footsteps heavy and certain. "Well, I suppose it's hard to believe after I attacked first." The voice continued with a terrifying calm. Ludger glared at the attacker, his blue eyes flashing with vigilance and anger. Arpa stood behind him, stunned, exclaiming, "Why?" In his hand was a radiant golden staff that tinkled with each step. His voice grew even deeper. "I didn't want things to go this far either." Limray slowly stepped forward, causing everyone to panic. Everything in the vast chamber fell silent, leaving only the heavy breathing of the wounded and the soft jingle from Limray's staff. Ludger, still shielding Arpa, slowly rose, his gaze as cold as ice. Arpa, still stunned, called out, "Limray." Limray looked at the scene ahead and said, "So you managed to get all the way here. I wondered if you could do it when you fought the Dark Knights." Limray replied nonchalantly, as if he had done a favor. "Oh, and don't worry about the young man I brought along. I took him to a place where people gather." Ludger tightened his staff, his face terrifyingly cold. "You know about me, so you're not Leslie. Could you be working with him?" Ludger pressed, trying to probe the connection between Limray and Leslie. Limray shook his head, a mocking glint in his eyes. "You think I'm not Leslie?" "Because Leslie would have no reason to linger in this mansion," Ludger said, affirming his reasoning. "You can't kill every mage here simply by using this mansion's system," Ludger continued, staring at Limray. "Based on what I found in the library's secret chamber." Ludger quickly explained. "The Kaiser Basin has 5 massive energy branches, and this mansion sits atop one of them, which allows these strange phenomena to persist. If all 5 branches collapse and disrupt the mana flow, This whole region would be destroyed at once, like a breached dam. That scenario best fits Leslie's goal. There are 4 other sites, so why would he waste time overseeing activity here? Limray laughed loudly. Ha, you deduced so much? He acknowledged Ludger's cleverness. But the energy branch here has already begun to fail. It's too late to stop it now. Limray looked down at the shattered crystal remnant where a blazing fissure was opening. Of course, the escape gate opened because you destroyed the system here. But if you escape, you'll certainly become a major obstacle to Leslie. Limray paused, fixing his gaze on Ludger as brilliant blue mana flared around him and his cloak billowed with power. That's why I must eliminate you here. Limray revealed his full plan, blue mana blazing about him. Ludger knew battle was inevitable. Arpa, take those 2 out of the mansion, Ludger ordered decisively. The boy Arpa froze, trying to protest. Master, his voice faltered. Ludger turned to Arpa with understanding in his eyes. I know you're confused, but moments like this happen in life, Ludger said. Arpa still searched for hope. Maybe there's a way without fighting. Ludger shook his head, thoughtful. Not everything ends well. Even with the best intentions, actions can have terrible outcomes. He stared ahead and offered a harsh lesson. What we must do is make choices that let us continue on the path we've chosen. Hearing that, Arpa realized Ludger was determined to protect him. He bowed his head, ashamed. I'm sorry, I acted foolishly. His expression fell. Ludger replied gently, It's all right. In fact, I hope you can keep that innocence. Understanding Ludger's intent, Arpa quickly helped Sempus and Loina to their feet and began moving toward the open door. Their footsteps echoed as Limray stood watching, blue mana still burning, silently seeing the wounded comrades away. Once they disappeared, Limray broke the silence. So you trusted my claim that I wouldn't harm that child, Ludger said, his gaze assessing. Your treatment of Arpa seems sincere. Limray sighed. I've softened with age, he admitted enigmatically. I approached the boy to watch you, but I ended up caring for him. Now alone, Ludger gripped his staff, his face unreadable and cold. You don't intend to stop even now? Limray tightened his golden staff. Unfortunately, I have a reason I cannot stop, he declared. I am prepared to embrace death. Limray tightened his golden staff. Unfortunately, I have a reason I cannot stop, he declared. I am prepared to embrace death. Ludger clenched his staff as dark mana and bright blue streaks gathered around him, his face set with resolute determination to fight. He accepted the challenge. As you wish. Instantly, Limray struck. He raised his golden staff and blue mana shot from its tip like spears, whining through the air. Sharp, powerful beams lunged directly at Ludger. Ludger did not hesitate. With astonishing reflexes, he dodged the first blow, his body slipping and weaving while flashes of mana passed by. A mantle of magic formed around him like a protective shield. A deafening boom rang out as Limray's attack slammed into Ludger's magical barrier. The entire chamber shook. Limray stared in surprise at where Ludger had stood. He dodged, he murmured, and that technique just now. He noted a difference in Ludger's fighting style. While Limray was caught off guard, Ludger closed the distance. Black and blue mana swirled about him as he launched a preemptive strike, creating a powerful vortex of magic that sliced down toward Limray. Limray turned to evade the surprise attack. The blue mana on his staff intensified, reflecting his steely resolve. He raised his staff high again. The cluster of golden keys at its tip flashed blinding blue and rang with force. This was his pinnacle magical power. Beams of light erupted from the staff and lashed out like vines, winding toward Ludger to bind him. Seizing the moment, Limray swung and summoned a massive little blade crackling with orange lightning, shouting one last word, farewell, then lunged at Ludger. But Ludger was faster. The silver rings on his wrist unfurled into metal strands and shot forward, the silver taken from the royal treasury. They wrapped tightly around Limray, sealing his movements. He was taken aback by the swift counter, stumbling back as the metal cords cinched inescapably. Both were bound. Unfazed, Ludger looked Limray in the eye and said, I fear I know a trick or two like that. Limray shot back. You have an interesting weapon yourself. Limray growled, his blade blazing. Though restrained, he remained determined. I may be unable to move, but I can still attack you. He unleashed a brilliant golden burst of mana, a strike like lightning, aiming to hit Ludger. But only residual magic remained in the space. Ludger had vanished. Limray scanned the area. He used it before, but I still can't get used to that instantaneous teleportation magic. Limray poured his remaining strength into the staff. A brilliant blue flare burst from its tip as he activated another powerful ability. The teleport hadn't been perfect. Under the shockwave of the spell, Ludger materialized and, struck by the force, collapsed to his knees. Limray analyzed aloud. It must be quite difficult to move freely in such a dense mana field. Ludger looked around the mana-choked room and thought, I didn't expect him to saturate and fracture the space with his own mana. Ludger decided to unleash his true power. He raised his hand to his mouth and lit his magical pipe. Purple smoke billowed into the air. He wasn't called a sage for nothing. I'd be dead if I didn't go all out as he warned. Ludger invoked his ultimate spell, Ars Goetia. Now, fully committed, Ludger released the power of Ars Goetia, a supreme spell. Dense strands of dark mana erupted outward. They took the form of screaming demonic entities with blazing blue eyes, bursting from Ludger and charging straight at Limray. Limray faced the terrifying sight with unshaken eyes, a hint of amusement on his face. Fascinating, he exclaimed, quickly assessing the magic. It's not a demon, though it appears so, and while it seems summoned, it's closer to a mana construct. As Limray analyzed, the dark entities closed in. He activated a brilliant blue defense from his golden staff. Blue strands of mana, like ropes, coiled tightly around the dark entities. They were not mere flows of mana. They formed into blackened arms with grinning mouths and cold blue eyes. The arms bound by Limray's mana screamed in the air. Then he slammed his staff down onto the floor. Immediately, a massive surge of mana erupted from the ground like a pillar of blazing orange magical fire, producing a violent explosion. Heat and pressure radiated outward. Ludger reacted in a flash, vaulting upward as his black magic wings unfurled, soaring high to avoid Limray's unexpected counterattack. Ludger hovered midair, his black wings beating gently through the purple magical smoke. Below, the remnants of the orange flame pillar faded, leaving Limray panting. It seems this fight will stay at this level, Limray sighed, his cold gaze fixed on Ludger. These old bones can't battle for long. He decided to end the duel with a single blow. Then let's finish this with one move. Limray's voice echoed through the chamber. Instantly, a gigantic magic circle, inscribed with ancient runes, radiated from him. Golden, orange light flared, bathing Limray in an imposing aura. But Ludger remained unshaken. His opponent's spell was powerful, yet he had his own card to play. He spread his black wings, gathering the remaining dark mana and blue light. An icy blue magic circle formed above him, directly countering Limray's flame. Ludger lowered his voice and replied, with pleasure. He channeled his power into the counterattack, naming his supreme spell, Sixth Circle Glacial Crusher. From the circle above, a colossal structure formed and plummeted, a massive icebreaker warship forged of diamond-hard pure ice. Below, from Limray's magic circle, a gigantic creature of flame and mana erupted forth. Shaped like a twisting fire dragon with a razor head and blazing red flames, it spiraled upward, ready to engulf Ludger. Its heat made the air arid and stifling. Limray's dragonfire mana met Ludger's icebreaker warship. A brilliant radiance flared as red and blue light intertwined, producing an explosion that shook the very mana branch beneath them. Scorching heat and freezing cold collided, creating an immense shockwave. Both Limray and Ludger were blasted backward by the shockwave, yet they remained standing. This life or death clash would not end until one of them fell completely. The clash of the two ultimate spells produced a massive explosion, a blinding white halo that swallowed everything. The shockwave was so fierce it tore space and shattered the remaining structure of the mansion. As the light dimmed, the vast chamber had become a chaotic ruin. Limestone dust and debris filled the air while gilded walls and ceilings began to collapse, fragments falling. Ludger seized the chaotic moment. Dark mana swirled around him, quickly restoring his cloak and shielding his body. He hovered amid the rubble, exhaling sharply. He looked back to where Limray had stood. Through the drifting dust, Limray's summoning circle lay utterly destroyed. Limray, the aging sage, had vanished. He had fled. But the consequences of the battle were irreversible. The entire mansion shook violently. Ludger scanned the scene, worry evident on his face, muttering, "Damn, why is it starting to collapse now?" There was no time to chase Limray. Ludger mustered his strength and reactivated his black magic wings, darting through the wreckage at breakneck speed. "I have to hurry. At least grab the book on non-elemental magic." His original goal was the secret library, whose forbidden knowledge must not fall into Leslie's hands. As he flew down a wooden corridor and fumbled through rooms, he cursed. This isn't the right way either. Passing a room, he froze at the sound of whispering inside. The mansion's protective wards are gone. Now we can take the books. Move, everyone. Grab what you can. He knew this was the room. He flung the door wide and strode in. charging straight for the room he was certain hid the book. But as the door yawned open, Ludger halted. His face hardened. His cold blue eyes widened in stunned surprise. Inside, he met a familiar face. The man looked him up and down with a judging stare. "Oh, you're with Limray's group," he said casually, with a hint of contempt. "You must be after something important to barge into the library in this chaos." The man shot Ludger a glance, then narrowed his eyes as if he had already figured things out. He held out a book. Dark brown leather bound with a simple golden plate on the spine. "This book?" the man taunted challengingly. He brought the book closer, eyes ablaze with pride. He laughed loudly, his voice echoing in the quiet. "Judging by your reaction, I guess you know what this is. Maybe you even entered that secret room before I did." Ludger tightened his staff, his gaze fixed on the book. "That's the non-elemental magic manuscript, isn't it? How did you find that room?" The man shrugged, sneering. "Pure luck. If the library hadn't collapsed, I would never have discovered it." The man was Torte, a scholar of the School of Truth. He placed other books into a case, his eyes full of greed. Ludger realized he wasn't someone to bargain with. Time allowed no delay. He drew a breath, forcing calm into his voice. "Let me take that book. You can keep the rest." Torte laughed, lightly twirling the book in his hands. "Do you think I'd hand over the century's greatest discovery? If you found it first, you should have held on to it." Ludger's expression darkened, his voice low. "Then, I'll have to take it by force." Before he could finish, an explosion thundered, dust billowing everywhere. The book was thrown, tumbling to the floor. Ludger shot his hand out. Silver strands flared and streaked like lightning. The silver threads coiled around the book and pulled it toward him. Torte lunged but was too late. The book rested in Ludger's hands. "Give it back. It's mine," Torte screamed. Ludger replied coldly. "It's in my hands now. Why should I return it?" Suddenly a figure entered, the clink of a staff announcing each step, and a calm voice spoke from behind. "Still the same, Torte." Torte froze. Limray?" Limray stepped from the shadows, his purple cloak fluttering. He looked at Torte with derision. "You still get angry before you understand the facts." His tone turned heavy. "You believe you possess ultimate knowledge and are willing to trample lives to prove it." Torte ground his teeth, his face twisted in fury. Torte shouted angrily, "Don't tell me you're doing this just because of your daughter. It was an accident. Why make it sound like it's my fault?" Limray said nothing. He put his hand into his pocket and produced something. He took out a small golden bell and shook it gently. The tinkling rang through the air. Immediately, from throughout the library, blue spirits emerged, circling Torte like faint smoke. An accident could have been prevented. "If you hadn't fled with your apprentice," Limray said, his voice full of resentment, "these souls are trapped forever in the Kesar Basin. Because of you." He pointed directly at him. "Including those you killed, to cover your mistakes. And all those who died, sucked into your blind greed and reckless acts." Torte fell silent, his face drained of color in horror. Limray had cornered him completely. Limray gripped his staff, his voice breaking. What father could bear knowing his daughter still suffers in darkness? "I only wanted to give her peace," Ludger murmured. "So, that's why you did all this?" Limray looked at Torte with cold resolve. "I cannot end you, but I will not let the man who killed my daughter live." Torte, furious, leaped up and shouted, "You've lost your mind. Do you know how important this place is?" His face darkened, swallowed by shadow, only his eyes burning with madness and hatred, as if consumed by negative emotion. "You're right. I'm no longer sane. Revenge has devoured my reason. All of you, those who lost yourselves to knowledge and ambition, turned me into this." Limray raised his staff. Behind him, a blinding surge of golden magic erupted, forming a colossal figure wreathed in destructive, blazing power. With that force, he pronounced the final judgment. "Then let us vanish together and rid the world of our unstable minds." Torte panicked wildly. His eyes bulged, green pupils dilating in terror. He knew Limray had crossed reason's boundary and could only squeak a feeble curse. "You're a mad old man. Your mind is hopelessly corrupted." The ceiling and walls cracked violently. Chunks of stone and earth began to fall from the library's dome. Torte looked up, mouth agape. Limray warned Ludger standing there, "Move now. You won't escape unless you hurry." Realizing the danger, Ludger called his name. Limray turned to Ludger with a haughty smile. "This is not for an outsider like you to meddle in. Leave and don't interfere." Ludger fell silent at the taunt. He wasted no more time. With the precious book secure in his hands, he launched into a powerful leap, sprinting across the crumbling floor. Limray watched Ludger for a moment, then turned away. He tapped his staff and advanced toward Torte. "Leslie will be deeply disappointed," he murmured mysteriously, then bid Ludger a cold farewell. "Goodbye, young man." Limray unleashed his finishing blow at Torte. The giant flaming silhouette behind him reached down toward the panicked Torte. Limray roared, "Now meet our creator, Torte." Torte raised his wand to defend himself. The terrible force of Limray's strike sent a gale roaring outward. Torte's face warped in sheer horror. He could only scream once in pain and despair. Limray. Outside the ruined building, aftershocks grew fiercer. A group of people, including a man in black and a man in white, fled the area. One shouted in panic, "Ah, the tremors are getting worse. Get as far away as you can. Otherwise we'll be swallowed." Arpa, Loina, and Sempus stood outside the manor. Loina fretted, "Lord Cherish still isn't out. What do we do?" Sempus ground his teeth. "Damn it. He's not dead, is he?" Arpa spotted something and shouted to the other two, "Look over there, it's the boss." Ludger finally burst out of the manor, hunching low as he raced away before everything collapsed. From inside the building, blue magic devoured everything, igniting a series of explosions before dissipating. Ludger shouted, "It's about to blow. Move," and kept running. The entire Kaiser Basin collapsed. A towering column of icy blue light erupted from the ground, shooting straight into the dark sky. The brilliant blue column pierced the starry night, illuminating the forest below. The light streamed from the rupture atop the hill where Kaiser Basin once stood, a reminder of the terrible destruction. Energy flooded from the breach, cracking the earth as blue magical beams spilled outward. One fleeing person cried in horror, "That branch is leaking out." "Damn, there's still so much we never found in the manor." Having escaped the danger zone, Ludger and his group stood watching the pillar of light beneath the starry aurora. Loina gripped his hand and said, "I still can't believe it. I never imagined the sage would do this." Arpa, too, was stunned. "Boss, so that old man." Ludger, tall with long black hair, turned his back and stared into the aurora. He reflected on Limray's actions. "I'm sure he left without regret. That's how he looked at me." The male teammate bowed his head in disappointment and said, "I understand." Suddenly, one of the escapees cried in amazement, "Everyone, look over there." Ludger and his group looked toward the outpost. A hazy blue smoke was rising from that direction. Another member cried anxiously, "Smoke is coming from the outpost. Something else must be happening there." Ludger focused, eyes narrowed under the aurora. He linked the events together. "Now that I think about it, the outpost is garrisoned on one of the 5 branches. Has Leslie begun to move?" A few hours later at the outpost central camp beneath the auroral night sky, several tents had been erected. In a cozy room of the outpost, an important meeting was underway. Various figures gathered around a large table with the queen at its center. The queen asked in surprise, "I see. So the pillar of light we saw came from the manor." Another person responded in disbelief. "How could Limray be behind this?" Presiding was Queen Utar, Ekaterina Volsvea, her purple and white cloak swaying as she began to speak. "I thank the expedition members for their reports. Now, let us explain what occurred at the outpost." The queen recounted the outpost's events. "Shortly after strange phenomena were detected in your area, beasts began attacking us from all sides, and hidden saboteurs carried out terrorist actions. We forced them to retreat after a desperate battle. But the barrier collapsed and there were heavy casualties." The queen concluded the official summary. "That's the full situation update. Now, let's discuss our next course of action." Ludger, standing opposite, thought, "I couldn't avoid coming here to explain what happened, but she still doesn't seem to recognize me. She has good instincts, so I must stay alert." One attendee, Derek Olson, an independent 5th Circle mage in a suit with a pocket watch, raised a pointed question. "Given what we've heard from the expedition, can we assume the perpetrators are collaborators of Sage Limray?" Ludger answered based on his observations and understanding. "Yes. They deliberately built this outpost on one of the 5 branches. They likely used the manor branch's destruction as a signal to start their terrorist actions." Gregorium Solet, the old tower's gruff representative with moss-green hair, interjected dismissively. "Well, they've all fled the outpost, so they'll be swept up by the phenomenon and die. Don't waste energy chasing them. Focus on repairing the barrier." Lumea, the graceful new tower representative with orange-gold hair, offered a deeper analysis. "These phenomena tie to the branch's flow. With one branch destroyed, the phenomena have weakened. That's likely what they were waiting for." Queen Ekaterina rose, stern-faced. and summarized the situation with weighty words. Very well. To recap, the enemy is destroying the valley's branches, and one of the 5 branches has been destroyed so far. We cannot be sure what will happen if another branch collapses. So we must protect all our branches, including the one beneath this outpost. To do that, we must leave some here to treat the wounded and defend the outpost. The rest will form 3 teams and move out to protect the other branches. Everyone in the meeting fell silent, intently listening to the queen. The queen issued her final command with authority. The operation begins in 30 minutes. Prepare everything needed and return here afterward. Lumea and several others bowed and replied, Understood, Your Majesty. Ludger left the warm room, step through the rubble and dust outside. He reflected on the complex situation and the queen's leadership. I know this is dire, but it's surprising how the old and new tower mages follow orders without much trouble. She still has that charisma that makes people obey. He recalled past arguments with her, thinking, we used to clash often because she was too emotional to make rational decisions. But it seems she's become far more skillful at deciding now. Suddenly his gaze caught something. He glanced over. Ludger stopped, glanced, and looked toward a girl searching for something near a tent at the outpost. That child must be the one who appeared when I first arrived here. Ludger strode forward under the aurora. Step. The girl turned, surprised to see him. Ludger spoke first. We meet again. I still don't have your answer from before. What are you looking for? The girl replied, I'm looking for my friend. Ludger bent down to her and asked, Oh? What's your friend's name? The girl widened her eyes in tension and shouted, Leslie. The girl's answer stunned Ludger. His face drained of color, a cold mix of surprise and suspicion in his gaze. He echoed the name in disbelief. Leslie. Ludger froze when he heard the name, Leslie. He leaned toward the girl, eyes wary and skeptical, surprised and pensive. Leslie? How would this child know Leslie? Sempus stepped forward at once and said, It's me, Ludger. I left Loina with the medical team. Ludger glanced back, alert. Ludger turned and asked, Are you all right? Sempus replied, Don't lump me in with that inexperienced young girl. I may not be perfect, but I can still fight. He turned toward the girl from before, but she had vanished. Sempus asked, What did they decide at the meeting? Ludger summarized, They'll choose who fights in half an hour. Those selected will be split into 3 groups before leaving the barricade. I expect each group will include members from the old Mage Tower, the new Mage Tower, and the Illusion Alliance. Ludger continued, The remaining independent mages will be distributed among those groups. You and I could be separated. Sempus accepted, understood. Well, we should do our best wherever we end up. Ludger looked Sempus in the eye and declared, Indeed, I'll trust you because the Duke Hybeck sent you. The cloaked man started, surprise clear on his face. How did you know that? He asked. Ludger explained his reasoning. Considering Duke Hybeck's character, I figured he'd send someone in an emergency, so I expected that person to approach me first. Of the 3 who came with us, Loina doesn't fit that role. And the sage Limray is an enemy, so he's out. The only one left was you, and you worked with me throughout the manor. Sempus scratched his head, a little embarrassed. My goodness. I was careful, but you've caught me. I was even told my presence might unsettle you, so I shouldn't reveal my identity. Ludger quickly changed the subject, his face serious again. It's fine. I won't let emotions sway me now. More importantly, you must have found something to come to me like this. Sempus replied, You're as sharp as I've heard. I did some investigating because I thought there might be clues nearby. Sempus analyzed. Limray said his daughter disappeared here, right? His daughter's name is Isabella, and she has a fiancé, who is also a mage. That fiancé is Leslie. Hearing the name jolted Ludger. His face grew even more serious. Ludger immediately understood. I see. Now the connection between Limray and Leslie is clear. He thought it made sense that they would decide to work together. I thought it best to learn more about the School of Truth. So I took this photo from a grave near the memorial at the outpost. Sempus produced a photograph. Ludger, hearing this, said, Taking items from the dead is rather disrespectful, you know? Ludger took the photo. I wonder if this dates back to the early days. There were more young people than I expected, Sempus answered. Sure, it's different now, but back then hopeful youths often joined them. Is this Derek Olson? Was he with the School of Truth? Sempus answered, Oh yes, though he didn't stay with them long. That must be Limray. The girl beside him is his daughter, Isabella. Ludger's gaze lingered on Isabella, and he remembered the girl who had disappeared earlier. He noticed a striking resemblance. The missing girl's hair color matched this little girl's in the photo exactly. He reached a grave conclusion. I don't think it's a coincidence that the girl went looking for Leslie. Sempus pointed at the photo and continued, and the man beside Isabella. Is Leslie. He pointed to a handsome young man in the picture. An hour later, somewhere in the basin, a thunderous explosion kaboom shook the sky. A brilliant blue magical beam shot up into the aurora-filled heavens. A man stood on a hilltop with his back turned, silently watching the phenomenon. He unclasped the necklace bearing a photo of a couple, Isabella and Leslie, saying nothing. This man was Leslie. Someone else ran up to report, I have news, Leslie. We're almost finished preparing to destroy the branch here. Leslie bowed his head, his face hidden in shadow, and answered, I'm sure they've learned our plan and have already started acting. Make sure we can strike as soon as preparations are complete. The reporter bowed. Yes, sir. We've arranged things at the other branches as well, so don't worry. He saluted and left. Leslie clenched the pendant tightly in his hand. Behind them, a second explosion reverberated. A colossal blue beam tore the sky apart again. Leslie said, That's the second one. Meanwhile, the old tower team, a group of mages, stood in the forest, horrified. An old tower mage. How could this happen? Another branch detonated before we could reach it. Derek Olson, an independent Five Realms mage, worried. Damn, it seems the other team couldn't stop it. He looked at his companion, tense. Was it the Illusion Alliance, or the new tower? I hope they're safe. Ludger stared at the beam and said firmly, We're lucky this basin hasn't been reduced to ash yet. Move out before another branch is destroyed. A voice from behind made the two turn. Ha! This is why we can't trust the new tower, or the Illusion Alliance. As Ludger and the others prepared to act, Gregorium Solut, the old tower's representative, shouted angrily, Now another branch has fallen. This whole expedition is doomed. There's no reason to stay. Let's return. Valentina ran forward to stop them, furious. What are you saying? We must fight to survive. If we abandon this now, Caesar's basin will collapse, and none of you will be safe. Gregorium remained resolute to leave. We can fall back to the outpost branch that's the strongest one of them all. Valentina turned to him, shouting, If we retreat, at least we survive by drawing power from the branch and forming a sigil and barrier. Survive, you say. So you don't care if people outside Caesar's basin get swept away? He turned and left with two others, declaring, Why should we worry about that? There's no reason to risk our lives for complete strangers. Valentina grit her teeth in anger. How can he be so selfish and shameless? Ludger replied calmly, Let them go. Forcing them to stay will only complicate things. We can hold them accountable once everyone is safe. He looked at the girl and asked, What about you? You don't need to return to the queen, do you, Valentina? I know you have orders, but still. Valentina answered with a stern expression, If we can't stop the enemy, His Highness won't be safe either. Now that those people have left, we're even fewer here. We can't leave any more. Ludger looked toward the direction the new tower had taken. That was where the new tower and Sempus had gone. It was worrying, but I don't have time to deal with that now. He took a deep breath and declared, All right, then we'd better keep moving. At that moment, in the new tower team, a massive explosion rang out, and a powerful blue beam swept across the ground, tossing the new tower members aside. Sempus collapsed, groaning, Ugh, damn. I never expected a traitor was lurking among us. Standing before them was Amar Chuvaka, deputy leader of Black Dawn. He wore a white suit and bore a haughty expression. Sempus continued, I let my guard down because you claimed to be a survivor from the manor. Well, this works in my favor too. I've always wanted to face you. Sempus's eyes filled with hatred. All hope is lost here. I have to hurry to help the other team. But first, I must take him down. Amar Chuvaka thrust out his hand. A toxic green fluid dripped from his palm, glowing with an unholy light. He warned Sempus, Stop pretending. You're already poisoned. My curse has seeped into your mana. If you try to use it, you'll relive the agony of your body being torn apart. Sempus staggered to his feet in pain, trembling as he laughed, body swaying. Ha ha ha. Pain? What pain are you talking about? I feel nothing. Sempus summoned a vivid blue bolt crackling with sound and dared, Now, let's see if you can beat me. Amar Chuvaka replied with his green poison, smiling wickedly. I see. The nickname, Mud Dog, is no exaggeration, Sempus. If you truly want that pain, I'll grant it. About 30 minutes later, deep in the valley, a cliff flared with violent blue-purple lightning. Explosions echoed through the forest, signaling a fierce battle had erupted. Wait, We must stop them at all costs. A green-haired warrior with a ponytail, face tense, shouted, thrusting her arm forward. Derek yelled as he charged into the fray. We won't let you run rampant any longer. Both sides collided. Some were struck down, screaming in agony. Valentina leapt into battle. In the air, an enemy slid like a phantom, radiating intense purple energy. He raised his hand and reflected a massive surge of purple magic straight downward. Valentina looked up in horror as the overwhelming stream of magic hurtled down, leaving her stunned. Derek, standing behind, raised his wand to help Valentina form a shield to block the devastating strike. When the beam dimmed, Derek anxiously asked, "Are you all right?" Valentina turned back and thanked him. At that moment their eyes were drawn to the star-filled night sky streaked with aurora. A majestic figure hovered above the glowing blue beam, looking down at them. "Ah, so it's come to this, has it?" A deep voice boomed from above. "Is that their leader?" Derek whispered. Ludger watched and recognized him as Leslie, but then he flinched. The man's blue eyes widened. "Wait, I know him." He recalled the photograph Sempas had shown him. This Leslie, now wielding terrifying power, was nothing like the calm, authoritative man he'd seen at meetings. He also noticed the man standing beside Leslie in the photo. Belkart Benmark, a member of the School of Truth, who had mysteriously died in the manor's corridor. But Sempas had said, he was found dead in one of the manor's halls. He was likely killed for being a member of the School of Truth. Then a real shock struck. Belkart's face, the man presumed dead, suddenly appeared before them. Derek blurted, "Belkart, you're alive? Were you behind all of this?" The scream of horror tore the air, laced with disbelief. Ludger couldn't believe it either. He'd clearly died in the manor. But a second later, he pieced it together. Limray had reported him dead. Apparently they'd plotted this from the start. Belkart smoothed his hair as secrets unraveled and said casually, "Nothing facilitates movement like turning someone else's corpse into your own and faking your death. But I no longer need to hide. Allow me to properly introduce myself. My name is Belkart Benmark, and I belong to a secret order. The alias I used there was Leslie." Ludger now faced an unavoidable battle as every assumption collapsed. Could he alone stand against this traitor long believed dead? Look forward to the new chapter. Night fell, and Ludger Cherish, also known by the alias John Doe, faced a group of mages. From across the way, Belkart Benmark spoke mockingly, wondering whether this moment should be cherished. Recognizing Ludger was still alive meant Limray's plan had failed. Ludger ground his teeth, unable to believe he'd made such a basic error in judging his enemy. He knew there was no guarantee someone in Black Dawn would use their real name, yet he had been deceived. The man before him, First Order Leslie, was actually named Belkart Benmark. A man named Derek, seemingly an old acquaintance, shouted at Belkart, demanding to know why he did this. Was it to avenge friends? The word avenge caught Ludger's attention. He turned to ask Derek for more details. Derek began to recount that, in their youth, Belkart had been close friends with Isabella and Leslie. Then tragedy struck. Isabella disappeared in a mana explosion. A year later, Leslie came looking for her but never returned either. Derek went on, saying he had heard rumors that after the incident, Belkart had begun researching the Kaiser Basin on his own. Whatever his reasons, Derek couldn't accept a massacre. He urged Belkart to let the dead rest and move on. He even promised to defend Belkart in court if he surrendered. Belkart coldly called Derek's name, completely ignoring the old friend's plea. He mocked Derek for always acting righteously without seeing that the world had changed, and said Derek didn't even understand what Belkart's true target was. Suddenly, a violent tremor occurred. Everyone panicked as the ground shook, realizing something was rising from the fissures. Ludger felt mana leaking from a nearby branch of the magic tree. A voice rang out as Belkart asserted that everything up to now had only been the beginning. He hovered in the air, declaring that this cliff sat right on the threshold. Once he destroyed it, the entire basin would be unable to hold. Ludger immediately grasped the danger. If any more branches were destroyed, they would all be in peril. He growled, determined to stop Belkart at all costs. Ludger drew his weapon, a short sword emanating a purple magical aura. However, an invisible pull suddenly wrenched the sword from his hand. Ludger was astonished, wondering if it was a magnetic force. Derek urgently shouted a warning. Belkart was a master of both metal and electricity magic. By combining them, he could generate an extremely powerful magnetic field. Derek advised Ludger to sheath the weapon in mana, so Belkart couldn't seize it. Hearing this, Ludger instantly infused mana into the sword, causing it to glow a brilliant blue. Ludger thought to himself that his silver bracelet shouldn't be affected by a magnetic field. But the fact it was being pulled proved Belcart's power was extraordinary. Ludger ordered everyone to hold on to their weapons tightly and not let them be taken. At the same time, Belcart, with a defiant smile, admitted he wanted to surpass his limits and began to strike. Countless metallic cubes appeared in mid-air, accumulating electrical energy. Belcart chanted the spell Infinitus Serin. Derek was horrified to realize Belcart was not just a typical dual-element mage, but had reached the 6 circles. Derek muttered that if Belcart used only one element, he would surely have attained a colored title. This showed how rare and powerful Belcart's multi-element ability was. Belcart looked down with a cold gaze and declared he would use his full power to destroy the cliff. He challenged them to try to stop him, as the metal blocks began to converge in the sky. Immediately after the challenge, the metal blocks shattered into countless fragments and plunged down like a destructive rain. The other mages hurriedly erected a defensive barrier, preparing for the first wide-scale attack. Countless metal projectiles rained down like bullets, creating a series of explosions across the ground. The lower-ranked mages struggled to hold on. They braced themselves, trying to stand firm and prevent the metal fragments from hitting the ground at all costs. Amid the hail of projectiles, Ludger began to observe and analyze. He watched the incoming cubes while Belcart remained suspended high above. Ludger realized that the best way to counter a magnetic field was heat. He summoned a blazing circle of fire magic. A massive fireball shot from Ludger's hand, racing straight into Belcart's metallic storm. Belcart smirked as his metal cubes began to crack and fracture under the intense heat. Below, Ludger's fire magic collided with the cubes, producing a huge explosion. Belcart conceded, "It seems you've realized you can heat the metal to strip it of magnetism." The cubes, glowing red-hot, shattered, but Belcart remained confident. He challenged, "But, do you think that mere flames are enough to outpace the rate at which I generate these cubes?" Riding a summoned beast, Derek watched the battle in despair. He lamented that this fight would drag on forever and wished the tower's veteran mages were here to do something. Ludger felt the pressure too. He noted that Belcart's attacks showed no sign of slowing. Even as a 6-circle mage, Belcart couldn't possibly possess that much mana. In a moment of insight, Ludger wondered if Belcart was using a stimulant similar to the one he used. A small crack on Belcart's face reinforced this suspicion. Ludger inferred that if this were true, Belcart would soon be unable to endure it unless he had a high toxin resistance. It seemed Victor's drug always had side effects. Belcart pressed his hand to his temple. He knew he could not delay any longer. Suddenly, Belcart sensed something amiss. He flinched. The others cried out in alarm. John Doe had vanished from their sight. In the blink of an eye, Ludger had teleported into Belcart's blind spot. He shot upward, appearing directly above his opponent. Ludger dove in to strike, but Belcart reacted in time, forming a dark energy shield to block the blow. Belcart realized he wasn't the only one who could read the field. He quickly gathered a purple sphere of electrical energy to counterattack. Echo is on. A bolt of purple lightning shot straight upward, but Ludger merely curled a lip. Belcart froze. He realized Ludger had planned ahead, placing metal under his clothing. Belcart's magnetic attack now worked against him, causing him to falter for a moment. Seizing the opportunity, Valentina leapt, using Belcart's own metal fragments as a springboard to close the distance. Belcart quickly donned an iron glove, preparing for close combat. Valentina's sword came down, but Belcart caught it barehanded. A metallic clang rang out, and he was only pushed back slightly. Valentina was utterly stunned. Her sword, wrapped in her aura, had been snapped easily by Belcart. Taking advantage, Belcart unleashed a powerful strike that sent her flying to the ground. Valentina fell but fortunately landed safely on the back of Derek's mount. Derek anxiously checked on her condition. High above, Belcart declared it was time to finish everything with one final blow. Both Derek and Ludger looked up in horror, sensing an enormous accumulation of mana gathering in the sky. A colossal cubic metal structure, wrapped in lightning, gradually emerged. Belcart coldly ordered, "Watch those below be crushed." Belcart's gaze was full of hatred and resolve. He wanted to witness his enemy's complete annihilation. This was his ultimate 6-circle magic. Heaven, crushing metal. A colossal structure of metal and energy began to descend. The mages panicked, ready to rush forward to stop it, but Derek held them back. Ludger shouted, ordering everyone to get out of the attack's radius immediately. People started fleeing in a desperate, chaotic stampede as the massive metal block was about to collide. A horrific explosion occurred, engulfing everything in light and destruction, closing the chapter with a dramatic ending. Continuing from the previous chapter, a towering column of magical energy shot from the ground into the sky, triggering a terrifying explosion. Belkart Venmark's attack after successfully activating a third vein. Witnessing his opponent's devastating power, Ludger was stunned. Meanwhile, his two teammates fled on a giant magic bird to escape the blast's reach. From afar, Belkart Venmark watched the energy column with a triumphant expression, confident that his plan had succeeded and that the mysterious phenomenon at the basin would soon vanish. Belkart's eyes shone with confidence and authority as torrents of purple magical lightning erupted around him, showing he wielded a fearsome power. Belkart stood firm amid the storm of magic he had conjured, ready to confront anyone who dared block his path, especially Ludger Celesy. Ludger quickly noticed something was wrong. One of the veins he had been protecting had vanished. He realized Belkart was moving at blistering speed, and that he had to stop him at once. With his loyal magic owl beside him, Ludger prepared for the chase. The starry night sky became the stage for the impending duel between the two powerful mages. On the back of the magic bird, Ludger's two companions, a man and a woman, looked back with worried faces, knowing they could do nothing more and placing all their trust in him. Pushing aside his fears, Ludger clenched his fist and steadied his gaze, determined to stop Belkart's mad scheme at any cost. In the forest where a vein had been destroyed, the mighty spirit beasts, among them a tiger and giant bears, gathered, radiating strong mana as they tried to stabilize the area. Belkart appeared, his face hardening with rage at the intervention of the spirit beasts. To him they were mere obstacles that had to be removed. Without hesitation, Belkart summoned his power as the purple magical lightning around him intensified, heralding a devastating attack about to be unleashed. Belkart narrowed his eyes, focusing on his target. He would allow nothing to stand in his way, not even the ancient spirit beasts of the forest. Belkart began activating his high-tech armor magic fused with technology, which formed a vortex of purple energy enveloping his body. In an instant, Belkart transformed, encased in a majestic knight's armor that exuded overwhelming magical pressure, ready for the final battle. Ludger finally caught up, facing Belkart in his new form, who sat astride a mechanical monster shaped like a giant skeletal bird, suspended amid arcs of magical lightning. Ludger could hardly believe his eyes. The power Belkart displayed far exceeded his expectations, filling the young mage with a sense of unease. Suddenly, a new presence appeared, a colossal stag with luminescent blue and white fur, radiating an ancient, sacred aura. Ludger stared in astonishment. It was the soul beast lord of the forest. After long concealment, it had emerged to defend its home from Belkart's destruction. From inside his armor, Belkart stared at the soul beast lord, just another obstacle to be eliminated in his view. Ludger froze as Belkart, armored and unhesitating, raised his weapon to strike at the soul beast lord. His madness had crossed all bounds. Belkart fired a devastating beam of purple energy from his armor, his target the newly appeared soul beast lord. The deadly beam tore through the night with terrifying speed, cutting a straight path toward the forest's spirit beast. Facing the destructive assault, the soul beast lord stood unflinching. It planted its hooves into the ground, sending out ripples through space as it prepared to unleash an ancient power. Almost instantly, countless circular portals opened around the soul beast. It began darting between them at breakneck speed, making its trajectory utterly unpredictable. Belkart's attack lost its mark entirely, while Ludger spotted a golden opportunity. Ludger realized the soul beast lord was targeting only Belkart, treating him as an enemy. Seizing the chance, Ludger decided to unleash one of his strongest spells. From the magic circles, innumerable streams of icy blue energy were summoned, coalescing in the sky above Belkart. Ludger poured in all his power and invoked a level 6 spell, Oceanic Icebreaker. A massive magic circle appeared beneath his feet, heralding an attack of colossal scale. From the heavens, a gigantic icebreaker ship forged of frost magic was summoned, plummeting toward Belkart with unstoppable force. Caught off guard by the combined assault of the soul beast and Ludger, armored Belkart was put on the defensive. His mechanical monster staggered midair. Despite his efforts to brace himself, Belkart could not withstand the ice ship's devastating impact. He screamed in agony as the strike crushed him. In that overwhelming moment, Belkart realized he could not die like this. He resolved to use his last resort, a desperate trump card. He withdrew a syringe containing a forbidden drug, a potent enhancer supplied to him beforehand. It was his final option to turn the tide. The scene shifted into a flashback. A mad-looking scientist, the creator of the banned drug, cheerfully presented it to Belkart, recounting the thrill of experimenting and perfecting it. The scientist explained the drug was extracted from a dead world tree and a demon specimen, capable of boosting strength by 300%. However, he warned Belkart of the cost, an unimaginably painful death and severe brain damage. But Belkart, eyes hard with resolve, seemed indifferent to the consequences. Back in the present, without hesitation, Belkart plunged the syringe into his neck, willing to sacrifice everything for power. The instant the drug entered his veins, a colossal surge of purple energy erupted from within the armor, and Belcart's eyes flared with blinding light. Belcart roared into the sky. The overwhelming energy cracked his armor as torrents of purple magical lightning burst uncontrolled, a transformation of excruciating pain. Seeing this, Ludger immediately understood this was no native power of Belcart's. He had surely used some kind of enhancer. Belcart's body trembled within the shattered armor. He endured indescribable physical agony, yet his vengeful will burned fiercer than ever. Writhing in torment, Belcart still bellowed defiantly. He cared not for death so long as he could achieve his goal. Ludger stood horrified, wondering whether Belcart, driven by a dream or obsession, could unleash such terrible power and truly be willing to end his own life. Belcart's armor had been utterly transformed, stained a deadly purple. He gasped, absorbing the new power while simultaneously consuming his own life force. The purple magical energy concentrated into a colossal sword in Belcart's hand. He readied a full-force strike, a gambit paid for with his very life. Sensing the danger, Ludger quickly took a defensive stance and prepared a protective magic circle to counter the impending blow. Belcart, now in the form of a dark knight, looked down at the soul beast lord. The creature remained, and it would be his next target. Suddenly, a youthful voice rang out, shouting for Belcart to stop tormenting the forest. A brave boy had stepped forward to confront him. Hearing that painfully familiar voice, Belcart froze. The purple magical flame in his helmet trembled fiercely as he turned to look down at the one who had called him. It was Leslie, bravely riding atop the soul beast lord. His appearance at this life or death moment was an unexpected variable, yet it was not enough to stop Belcart, who, consumed by power and hatred, was preparing to unleash his final, devastating strike. Ludger could not allow Belcart to launch that annihilating blow. He shot a beam of radiant magic to block it, but it was too late. Two colossal streams of energy, one from Ludger, one from Belcart, collided, producing an earth-shattering explosion that lit up the night sky. The whole forest was swallowed by the blast's light. The force shook the ground and sent trees flying. This was the final strike that would decide who survived. When the dust settled, Belcart lay motionless in a deep crater, his armor gone. Exhausted, he muttered that he still had work to do and could not fall here. As Belcart gasped for breath, the boy Leslie appeared and asked if he was all right. Belcart looked up, eyes wide with shock, unable to believe his childhood friend was there. He whispered, "Leslie." Belcart's mind spun and memories flooded back. A stream of flashbacks began, returning him to images of Leslie, his dearest friend, smiling gently beneath a starry sky. Those were bright, happy days when Belcart, Leslie, and Isabella were children, playing together in the woods with lively Isabella running ahead and the two boys chasing after her. In their games, quick Leslie always reached the tree first and won, while Belcart was always the slowest, panting behind. Leslie and Isabella would turn to watch Belcart, breathless. Though he always finished last, Belcart felt happy to have such friends by his side. Belcart remembered his younger self, a shy, frail boy who always ran after his two friends. Or the times the three of them practiced magic together. Leslie was always the most enthusiastic, cheering when Belcart showed off his talents to Isabella. In that flow of memories, Belcart told himself that Leslie and Isabella were the dearest friends he had. But one day his feelings for Isabella grew beyond friendship. He fell in love with his childhood companion. Because he felt weak and unworthy, Belcart decided he would only confess to Isabella once he had become honorable and more deserving. Yet life was not so kind. On a beautiful day when Belcart had prepared a bouquet to declare his feelings, he witnessed a scene that shattered his heart. It was Leslie, his closest friend, standing before Isabella, saying something that made her radiant with happiness. Isabella joyfully told Belcart that Leslie had just confessed his love to her. Belcart's heart stopped. He quickly hid the bouquet behind his back, swallowed his tears, and forced a smile as he congratulated his two best friends. The memory shifted again to their magic training sessions. Despite his pain, Belcart stayed by his friend's side. Then tragedy struck. Isabella went alone to the basin and died there. Belcart blamed himself, thinking he should have gone in her place, but he had been too absorbed in his magical thesis. The memories blurred into an image of Leslie, frantic and desperate. The tragedy had torn their friendship apart forever. Her father, Limray, appeared and pronounced some verdict about the tragedy, seemingly placing the blame on him. In the judgment of Isabella's father and his close friend Leslie, he could do nothing but kneel and endure punishment for a tragedy he never intended. Belcart's eyes then burned with anger and helplessness. The loss of Isabella and Leslie's suffering forged in him an iron will to become powerful at any cost. Back in the present, Belcart lay on the ground, battered and wounded, yet all physical pain paled beside the shock of seeing Leslie alive in flesh and blood. The sight of his old friend became the final spark that ignited the resolve and oath he had long buried. Tears streamed down Belcart's cheeks as he murmured unconsciously. After all his friends had done for him, the time had come for him to repay them. With superhuman will, Belcart forced himself to sit up. Leslie stared in astonishment at his friend, unable to understand how he could move at all after such grievous wounds. Belcart knelt on the ground, breathing heavily. He took Leslie's appearance as an omen, a sign that he was not yet meant to die. At that moment, a figure appeared. Both Belcart and Leslie looked up. Ludger had arrived, standing imposingly before them. He stood there beside the Soul Beast Lord, looking down at Belcart with a complex expression. In that instant, Belcart realized the obstacle in his path. Man calling himself Ludger Cherish was actually John Doe. He let out a bitter laugh, convinced Ludger had come to finish him off. Amid the ruined landscape, a battered Belcart spoke with the boy Leslie, urging him to step back as if determined to handle everything himself. A voice rang out, Ludger Cherish, questioning Belcart's actions, bewildered at why he would do such a thing. Both Leslie and Belcart looked up at Ludger under the starry night sky. His arrival unexpectedly shifted the situation. Determination flared in Belcart's eyes. He had made a final decision that nothing could sway. At that moment, Ludger appeared with a golden-haired girl named Isabella. She looked surprised and worried at the scene before her. Upon recognizing Leslie, Isabella cried out with joy. She had finally found the one she had been searching for. Isabella and Leslie embraced in delight. Amid the tension, the children's reunion was a rare, warm moment. Belcart watched the two children playfully together in silence, feeling some measure of relief within. Overcome by emotion at the sight of them, tears streamed down Belcart's face as he looked up at the night sky, accepting his fate. Rudiger regarded the children with a calm yet sympathetic expression, understanding their bond. Belcart was stunned by Ludger's next words. It seemed he had proposed an unimaginable solution. A spatial gate opened, the only escape route. He told the children and Belcart to go through it. Leslie and Isabella looked at each other, hand in hand, hesitant and unwilling to leave their friend behind. Belcart wept, knowing he could not accompany them. This was their final farewell. Ludger turned to the children and promised he would find the person they were waiting for, Belcart. To seal his vow, Ludger gestured to Leslie, establishing an oath of honor. Seeing that, Belcart instinctively reached out as well, his eyes filled with anguish. Leslie and Isabella clasped hands and turned toward the spatial gate, a new journey awaiting them. Watching the children leave safely, Belcart smiled with relief, though the smile was tinged with sorrow. The gate shone brilliantly, promising a new future for the two children. After they departed, Ludger sat beside Belcart and explained that he would have to pay for his past deeds. Ludger explained that the punishment would turn him into an amnesiac child, a form of rebirth. Behind him loomed the image of a powerful spirit beast. Belcart silently accepted the penalty. For him, it was the necessary atonement for his past. Ludger sat in quiet witness to Belcart's choice, respecting the decision and preparing to carry it out. The two men sat together, staring at the dim light left by the gate, one preparing for the end, the other preparing to witness it. Belcart uttered his final words, accepting that this was the price for his actions. Ludger listened in silence, not judging, merely witnessing John's choice. After speaking, John staggered and collapsed to the ground. The transformation had begun. Belcart fell and was reborn as a boy with white hair. He had been reborn but lost all his memories. The boy's hand trembled. He did not understand what was happening to his body. The boy stared at his hand in bewilderment, then glanced down at Ludger's feet standing beside him. Ludger looked coldly down at the child and explained that this was the punishment. He would live in this form until his sins were atoned for. The vision blurred and the boy fell asleep. He trembled and felt disoriented, staring vaguely at the stranger who spoke in riddles. Ludger turned away, perhaps sensing he had been too cold. He gently placed his hand on the boy's head, comforting him with the promise that when the punishment ended, he would be reunited with his friends. A faint glimmer of hope lit the boy's eyes at the mention of the future. After consoling the child, Ludger stood and walked away, leaving Belcart still lying on the ground. His task here was finished. Ludger looked ahead with steely resolve, vowing to keep fighting to the end. Determination showed on his face. He would allow himself no rest. Under the night sky, Ludger approached a majestic spirit beast shaped like a glowing stag. The spirit beast bowed to Ludger, a gesture that served as a farewell. Its gaze was gentle, yet full of dignity. Elsewhere, a man in white stared at the pillar of light and exclaimed in amazement, "This is insane. You're as dangerous as the rumors said." Sempus looked to be in intense pain, apparently affected by a toxin. The man in white, his hair platinum, conjured a greenish-blue flame in his hand, his expression brimming with confidence. Suddenly, Arpa lunged forward and delivered a kick straight to the white-haired man's face. Sempus was taken aback that the boy felled him so quickly. He, too, was exhausted from the battle. After knocking out the opponent, Arpa stepped over to Sempus and began to speak. With the fight over, the two faced each other. Their clash had ended, giving way to a brief but important exchange. Arpa produced a vial that appeared to be an antidote, and at that moment something strange happened nearby. Miraculously, the forest creatures gathered around the mana vein and somehow helped stabilize it. Everyone cheered with joy as the pillar of light finally vanished. The crisis was over. At that moment, Queen Ekaterina arrived with her retinue, including Valencina, and breathed a sigh of relief to see Valencina safe. Valencina still looked angry. Though the crisis had passed, she could not accept someone's actions. Queen Ekaterina gazed into the distance with a stern expression, understanding Valencina's anger. Valencina and the queen noticed an old mage with green hair, Mage Gregorium, who had fled when danger struck. Gregorium arrogantly declared that as long as everyone was safe, there was no problem. He showed no remorse. Valencina could no longer contain herself. She pointed at Gregorium and shouted, calling him a coward who ran away. Gregorium crossed his arms and coolly retorted, asking why he should stay in a dangerous place. Queen Ekaterina stepped forward to quell the dispute, her face icy. Gregorium smirked, apparently assuming the queen would side with him, a senior mage of the old tower. Without warning, Queen Ekaterina threw a hook punch straight into Gregorium's face. Everyone was stunned. No one expected the queen to act so decisively. Valencina and the other mages smiled in approval. Gregorium collapsed to the ground while his comrades shouted, demanding to know what the queen was doing. She clenched her fist, her anger far from spent. She roared that she would never forgive anyone who abandoned their comrades. The queen declared firmly that she did not need the old tower's support if they sent only cowards like Gregorium. Gregorium was horrified by the queen's declaration. His status had completely collapsed. With a steely gaze, Queen Ekaterina reaffirmed her authority before all the mages. At that moment, a colossal spirit beast descended from the sky, drawing everyone's attention, and stepping down from the beast's back was none other than Professor Ludger Cherish. He alighted gracefully, his demeanor confident and mysterious. Valencina stepped forward to thank Ludger, and he replied with modest restraint. Queen Ekaterina approached and looked Ludger squarely in the eye, while Gregorium behind them still fumed. He faced the queen, ready for the important conversation to come. Ludger stepped toward Gregorium, who was muttering. Ludger's gaze was razor-sharp, silencing him. Gregorium broke out in a cold sweat. His arrogance evaporated in the presence of Ludger and the queen's authority. With matters settled, Queen Ekaterina fell silent and regarded Ludger. She wished to speak with him privately. Sometime later, Ludger sat alone by the campfire, engrossed in an ancient book. The volume was filled with archaic characters, detailing a type of attributeless magic and curses from the divine forbidden knowledge he sought. Queen Ekaterina found Ludger and approached, breaking his solitude. Ludger looked up, mildly surprised but composed. He knew this conversation was unavoidable. The queen smiled knowingly and said, "I've long wondered, and now I'm certain. Machiavelli." Ludger was stunned. The alias he had buried long ago. Machiavelli had been named so casually by the queen. Seeing his bewilderment, the queen winked playfully, clearly amused by his reaction. She teased further, asking if he had died and come back to life. Ludger hastily asked her to lower her voice. Returning to a serious tone, the queen stared into the fire and asked the final question. "So why did you flee? You didn't say goodbye and pretended you were dead." Under the star-filled night sky, Queen Ekaterina bluntly confronted Ludger Cherish, a professor at the Thorn Academy, about his true identity. In response, Ludger only gave a vague smile, implying he had his own reasons to keep it secret. The queen frowned slightly, suspecting Ludger was secretly working for an underground organization and promising to keep it confidential. He did not deny it, merely replied gently, "You're not far off." Not wanting to prolong the sensitive topic, Ludger shifted the conversation to ask about the reconstruction of the Kingdom of Utah. The queen said the internal purge was complete, and now she must consider foreign relations. She explained that Utah has abundant natural resources, but lacks mage manpower to exploit them. That responsibility used to fall to Crown Prince Alexei, so she must now rebuild those connections from scratch. Mentioning the old Tower of Magic, Ekaterina recalled with irritation how she once punched their representative out of frustration with the leader. She sighed, worrying whether she could still secure support from both factions. Ludger nodded slightly, then made a strategic suggestion. If Thorn and Utah cooperated, both could significantly save on magical research material costs. He admitted Thorn would take a short-term hit, but in the long run it would be a beneficial arrangement. The queen hesitated, concerned about the prime minister's reaction, but in the end agreed. Ludger promised to personally guide her when she visited Thorn. A few days later, on the last night of the Mystic Night event, a teleportation gate opened in the middle of the forest. Participants emerged exhausted but joyful to be home. Some even swore they would never return next year. Watching from afar, Ludger remarked nonchalantly, "Their steps sound heavier than the wind." Beside him, the boy Arpa curiously asked, "What's wrong with them, sir?" Ludger replied, "They must have been caught up in a mess. Still, today wasn't for nothing." Arpa glanced at the bag he carried. "What are you carrying, teacher?" Ludger opened it to show horns and fangs of a divine beast, a reward for saving the forest. He said he could have taken something else, but wanted to see that power with his own eyes. In the distance, the form of the divine beast appeared hazily. Ludger explained that it did not speak directly but transmitted thoughts through mana currents, a rare, intelligent form of communication. Suddenly, Arpa noticed someone sitting farther away. Ludger turned, surprised. Arpa suddenly pointed. "Teacher, there's someone sitting over there." Ludger squinted and saw a lone child perched on a rock in the night forest. Arpa guessed the child might be waiting for friends, but if it kept waiting it could end up stranded. Ludger pondered. Even so, it will keep waiting, because that's what friends do. In the distance, a child sat alone on a rock in the silent night forest. The next noon, at the bustling Leatherbelk station, Ludger, Arpa, and an elderly man, Hybek Katatushan, sat on a bench. Hybek thanked Ludger for the useful information, saying he had enough to report to his superiors. Ludger then mentioned compensation pay, which surprised Hybek. He had assumed the advance payment for the mission covered everything. Ludger smiled, saying that because Hybek had prepared a safety plan in case Ludger betrayed him, that effort deserved separate payment. Hybek was a little annoyed but admitted Ludger was right. He looked at Arpa, standing beside Ludger. He couldn't guess who the child was. There was no information about the boy's identity. Ludger praised Arpa for a job well done and told him to go to the safe house. Arpa modestly replied that it was all thanks to Ludger, and it had been a long time since they'd traveled together. Arpa said that on this trip he had seen many mysterious things, but the forced goodbyes with those he'd met left the deepest impression. The innocent boy asked Ludger whether he might experience many more things like this in the future. Ludger smiled softly and reassured the boy not to worry. He promised Arpa there would be plenty more opportunities in the future, prompting the boy to gleefully ask, "Really?" That afternoon, in a random warehouse down an alley, a man held the beast's tooth and wondered why Ludger had summoned him to an empty storage room. Ludger explained it was a tooth he brought back from the basin as a memento. Hans, Alex, and Pantos were also present. Alex mocked him, asking who would keep an animal tooth as a souvenir. Hans was shocked when Ludger said it came from a divine beast. He stammered questions about the creature found in the basin. Ludger instructed the man on how to use it, explaining that the divine beast's genes could suppress the monster's wild nature inside him. Hans agreed, saying he had nothing to lose. Ludger reassured him not to worry. They would capture him again and reverse the change. Alex and the large man Pantos watched from behind. Finally, Hans agreed to try. With a shout of determination, he drove the tooth into the palm of his hand. Immediately, a stream of blue energy enveloped his body. He began to transform. His body grew larger, sprouted white fur and majestic horns, becoming a radiant divine beast. Alex exclaimed in astonishment, asking if it was the same divine beast Ludger had seen. Ludger confirmed, saying it looked identical but smaller, and that Hans had likely become a full beast. Ludger turned to the divine beast and called Hans's name, asking how he felt. The beast stood silent. Suddenly, the beast's eyes flashed with blue light. Sensing the change, the others immediately assumed defensive stances, ready for anything. The divine beast Hans staggered, seemingly unable to control his new body, and cried out, "Wait!" The creature lost its balance and tumbled forward. The blond man and Phantos looked at each other in bewilderment, not understanding what was happening. Ludger calmly told Hans to stay still and ordered Phantos to assist him. Hans in beast form stammered that it was his first transformation and felt very different. Ludger reassured him he'd get used to it after a few tries. More importantly, Ludger asked Hans to try using magic in this form. Hans replied in surprise that he had never learned how to use it. Ludger asked if he felt anything. Hans confirmed he did, and said he would try a little. Small blue mana bubbles began to gather around Hans's fur. A sphere of magical energy formed between his two antlers, leaving even him astonished. Ludger was pleased. He had only considered it a possibility and hadn't expected it to work so well. He noted that if controlled properly, it would be very useful. Ludger observed that, because they were always being watched, they couldn't use this power frequently, but having another option was good. He ordered Hans to revert. At that moment, Drops of blood fell from somewhere, pooling on the floor. From the blood pool, Grandaire suddenly appeared, remarking the divine beast was even more intriguing than she had thought. Her sudden presence stunned the group, especially Alex and Phantos. Grander joked that it was perfect. She had always wanted a fur coat made from a divine beast, causing Hans in beast form to break into a sweat of fear. She laughed that she was only teasing because he looked so amusing to provoke. Ludger replied sternly that it did not sound like a joke and asked her not to say such things again. A few days later at Thorn, Ludger held a meeting with Queen Ekaterina and the rector. The agreement documents lay on the table. The rector smiled with satisfaction, saying she believed they could reach an agreement. She was delighted that they could finally assist in exploiting natural resources. Hearing this, Queen Ekaterina also breathed a sigh of relief, her burden lifted. The rector thanked Ludger, saying that thanks to him she had enjoyed an excellent meeting with the queen. Ludger modestly replied that he had merely relayed to her what the queen had proposed during the mystic night. Queen Ekaterina bade them farewell, looking forward to the collaboration. The rector returned the sentiment and asked Professor Ludger to escort the queen. On the way, the queen complained she was exhausted after 3 hours of continuous negotiations, but conceded that both sides had benefited. The queen remarked that, if anything, the rector stood to gain slightly more. She admitted she could not afford to let her guard down before the rector, that was why she was the boss. The queen asked Ludger if he needed an escort for his subordinates and then inquired whether she might tour Thorn. She explained that in the kingdom of Utah there were few academies of this kind, so she planned a large-scale expansion during Reconstruction and intended Thorn to serve as a model. Ludger warned that the motive was good, but replication does not always succeed. The queen resolved that she must try anyway, for if one always expects failure, nothing will be accomplished. Ludger smiled, saying she had not changed and that he would cheer her on. The queen promised to invite Ludger if the project succeeded. Ludger said he would eagerly accept. Then, suddenly, he asked about the former representative of the old Tower of Magic, Gregorium. Ludger said he had heard Gregorium was expelled for tarnishing the old Tower of Magic's reputation. The scene cut to a carriage rolling past a large building. Inside the carriage, Gregorium angrily pounded the side, shouting that he had done so much for the tower, yet they had cast him out. Gregorium muttered in rage that his contributions and network were vast enough to escape a murder charge with only a warning, yet they expelled him instead of demoting him. He suddenly noticed something odd. Several elders close to him had attended the disciplinary meeting, but they seemed strange. He wondered if there were things he did not know. Gregorium panicked upon realizing the carriage was heading the wrong way. He shouted at the driver that he had told him to go to the station. A strange voice from the rear told Gregorium to be quiet. A mysterious masked man was in the carriage, warning that even with the carriage moving, everyone would hear if he made a scene. Gregorium was terrified, stammering to ask who the stranger was. He stammered again, asking the masked man who he was. The masked man introduced himself as Zero Order. He revealed that he had orchestrated Gregorium's expulsion from the tower because he had business to handle with him. Gregorium was stunned, unable to believe what he had just heard. Shortly after, Gregorium fainted and slumped in his seat. The masked man confirmed that Gregorium had been cast into the surface world of the dreamscape and that everything was proceeding according to plan. His blonde subordinate cautiously asked whether they intended to recruit Gregorium as a new executive member. Zero Order looked at his subordinate and noted he seemed unhappy with the idea, unlike when facing Ludger Cherish. The subordinate replied that he could not trust Ludger, but Ludger was more skilled than the previous John Doe. The subordinate continued that, conversely, Gregorium's abilities were far too lacking compared to his grandiose ambitions, making him worthless. Zero Order agreed. Hadn't he already realized that? He chuckled, explaining that Gregorium's subconscious in the surface world was linked to him, so it was not hard to tell. The subordinate laughed that it made sense, since their leader had created their meeting chamber in the surface world. The subordinate grew horrified as he realized their leader planned to use Gregorium as a sacrificial offering. He asked whether that meant the one would awaken if they offered a sacrifice. The masked man said he needed confirmation. Based on Basara's awakening, it seemed other disciples had begun to move as well, including Nana and Helia. The subordinate deduced they had chosen Gregorium, a skilled mage, to probe the dreamscape. The masked man confirmed, saying that because Gregorium had been cut off from all ties, no one would care what happened to him. He added that even if Gregorium reached the station, the Tower of Magic seemed to have other plans to safeguard their secrets, so they could use him as they pleased. The subordinate asked what would happen to Gregorium in the meantime. The masked man replied that he would wake in 3 days if nothing went wrong, but if he did not, it would mean the most troublesome disciple had awakened the one dwelling in the deepest abyss of the subconscious. Meanwhile, at Ludger's office, His assistant Owen reported there were internal rumors that he had betrayed the organization after Leslie's death, the First Order. Owen explained that although everyone knew the Divine Beast killed Leslie, Ludger riding the Divine Beast and confronting Leslie would still be problematic. However, she felt relieved because some people were siding with him. She said they were arguing that Ludger was unaware of Leslie's plan and acted only in self-defense. However, Owen noted that many remained skeptical. Ludger asked whether someone was fanning the flames behind them. Owen confirmed and said she believed Nikolai was behind it, no one else could be. She asked what Ludger would do. He calmly told her to ignore it, as he did not want to enter a battle that would surely become messy. More importantly, Ludger confidently declared that Nikolai could not expel him from the organization no matter how hard he tried, because only Zero Order had that authority. Ludger reassured Owen that things would settle with time. She breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly, a communication device on Ludger's desk lit up. He wondered who was calling. Was it Hans? He picked up, and a voice asked if he was available. Owen urgently reported that an important guest had arrived at the safe house looking for him and that he needed to get there as soon as possible. Ludger replied in surprise, "An important guest?" That afternoon, at a disguised safe house called UN Owen, the sun shone brightly. Ludger arrived, and was astonished by the unexpected visitor. He had never imagined Princess Eileen would come all the way here. Ludger's subordinates reacted humorously to the princess's appearance. Princess Eileen smiled and remarked that she accepted their rather eccentric personalities. Princess Eileen got straight to the point, saying there was a matter she needed to discuss with him directly. She ordered her aide Phaseus to explain. Phaseus asked Ludger if he remembered their conversation about goblins hiding in the capital. He then revealed shocking news. After investigation, they confirmed the goblins' allies were located outside the city.